trees in the backwoods night. Red lights cutting through the pine in flight. Bigfoot stomping with his youngling beard. Whispers of tales that ain't too clear. UFOs buzzing solo through the haze. Howling banshees set the forest ablaze. Jersey devil howls, drink rays to the sky. Drunken cryptids party until the morning's night. Yeah! It's showtime, running wild in the moonlight. Stars burn down, watch the freaks all take flight.
To good times.
Raise your glasses to the mysteries divine. It's showtime, let the cryptids realign.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Drunken Cryptids. I gotta give a quick shout out, I do it every week, do it every time, blademedia.com. Dylan, thank you for all the hard work you've put into the website and the logo. The logo is catchy, it's great, it catches everybody's attention. If you guys want to have somebody help you out with your multimedia needs, whatever needs to be done, check out Dylan over at blademedia.com. That's BLAYED media.com. I also got to give a shout out to my team. You guys, I would not be where I'm at today if it wasn't the guys and gals behind me. I have a great support team. I have a great support system. They keep me on my toes. They keep me going. And sometimes when you stumble, they're right there to pick me up. So you guys, I appreciate all the hard work you guys do in the background. It means the world to me. There's too many of y'all that go on names, so I can't. And of course, my podcast brothers out there, you guys know who you are. I brag about you all the time. We got so much more going on, so much more happening, and I can't wait for it to happen. Real quick events coming up, though, and they're coming pretty fast, you guys. The first one's going to be, I am going to be speaking at the Ohio Bigfoot Jamboree 2 in Ada, Ohio on October 4th. The Crypts of the Corn podcast was nice enough to reach out to me. You guys know we did a live show earlier this year together, and they reached out, and they wanted me to be a speaker, so I'm truly honored. My first speaking engagement is going to be there. I'll be in the family tent. I'll be the headliner. And of course, we're going to have a table and booth set up there, and all your other podcasters and everybody that you guys listen and follow, they're all going to be there as well. Miss Monsters and Mullets, Nevermore Hollows, Chumming with the Spirits. I mean, good Lord, I'm trying to think of who else I'm forgetting coming up there. And if I did forget you, I apologize, but they're all going to be there, you guys. Yeah, but let's get into tonight's episode, though. Tonight's really, really unique, and I had heard a little bit about this story. In 1981, a family in rural Ohio was pretty much attacked. They were laid under siege for roughly around 3 nights, I believe, and I may have the information wrong, and I'm going to be corrected here shortly if I am, and that's okay, though. The family was under siege for a couple of days at least by these strange entities. This encounter has everything in it from Sasquatch to UFOs, and with my own little bit of research and what I've heard, I have some theories about it, and we'll cover some of those probably at the end, but we have James coming on, and James has done some really, really extensive research, and he was nice enough to reach out to me a couple of weeks ago and want to come on the show and share the actual story of what happened that night. So, without further ado, it's showtime. James, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, man. I do want to thank you again for reaching out and talking with me, communicating back and forth on Facebook. It's been a lot of fun. You sent me some of the pictures, which has just been like, whoa. And I actually, this week, I did a little dive into the night siege, and I wanted, just kind of freshen myself up with, and I was able to, dig into Dennis's book a little bit. So, get some information out of that. And it's a really fantastical encounter. I don't want to use the term story because I don't think it's a story. It's an actual encounter. And
yes,
from what I was digging into, I have some ideas on what it could be. But with your research and everything, let's jump into it. But first off, tell everybody about you and how you stumbled across this.
My name is James Bryce. I'm from Eastern North Carolina. I have a military background, U.S. Air Force, back in the 80s, intelligence. Um, Been married 43 years to the same lady, 5 grown children, 8 grandchildren. I'm an ordained minister, still active in the church, pastored for a little while, teacher, high school teacher at two Christian schools for 9 years, and I have a doctorate in Messianic Jewish theology. And I got into this, believe it or not, when I was young. I had a UFO experience back in 1976 where I had, and this is a little off the subject, but it tells you a little bit about me. Me and another individual had some missing time, and had to get some help on that. And it got me interested in the UFOs, and that expanded into Bigfoot and a little bit of the paranormal. Some experiences I had when I was younger.
Okay.
Got in the Air Force.
See,
just got busy.
You're a whole nother episode besides this.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should mention that.
No, I may have to have you on to talk about something. Okay, so I'm already curious. 1976.
Yeah.
You had a UFO encounter. You and a buddy with some missing time. What happened? You just got to give us a cliff notes on this one. I'm curious now.
Okay. To make a long story very short, a friend of mine came over. It was in November. I can't remember if it's the 6th or the 12th. It's it's just one of those things. I don't dig it up and rehash it all the time. But we saw a light go overhead and thought that was kind of curious the way it was acting. It landed in the woods between a wood line and a golf course, and we went into an open field and watched the shiny lights, and then we noticed some lights that were bobbing up and down in the tree line. The light itself was deep in the woods, and we noticed they looked like people, and we turned around and ran home. And when we got home, we realized that what should have taken probably about 3 minutes to get out of that field, maybe a total to get back to the house, we had been gone a little over an hour. And but I mean, we left it at that, and then I started having some nightmares and walking in my sleep and going down. I'm assuming, I wasn't sure, but I woke up with sand on my feet, and maybe I was walking down to that location because the light still appeared there. And I had to get some help, went under hypnosis, remembered some stuff that I didn't appreciate, and so I pretty well shut that out, and got highly interested in this one girl, got married, got in the Air Force, pretty well blocked it out and forgot all about it. And about a year into my career field, I had my secret, but I needed my top secret. And if you know anything about getting a top secret clearance, at least back then it wasn't easy. And they came to the Air Force OSI office and removed me from my job for a little while. And then the representative from the National Intelligence Service showed up and wanted to know all about what I saw and what I experienced. And to this day, I'm not sure how they found out that I even saw a UFO. They didn't know about the other stuff, but they knew about the UFO, and they wanted all the information on it. I thought they would think I was crazy, and I gave them everything that I could remember, even under hypnosis. They wanted drawings. I had to go under some psychiatric, 3 or 4 psychiatric exams, and then after they were evaluated, sit in front of a psychiatrist for about an hour. He submitted his report to the DC office, and in 3 days, I had my top secret clearance. So that's the short story.
That's a whole episode there.
Yeah,
in its own.
The agent put me at, I told him, you're going to think I'm crazy. You're asking me to do this, but what I'm going to give you, and I've never told anyone, I've mentioned it to my wife, but she had never even seen any drawings because I had never drew anything. And I'm a good drawer, but I had to because I was ordered to. I said, but you're going to think I'm crazy. And he looked right at me. He says, we've taken reports like this before. We want this one. So
this is like a whole can of worms I did not think we were going to be opening up today.
Oh, yeah. So, but we can talk about that later.
Man, we could definitely. Okay. I know we scheduled for one topic, and we're leading in with this topic here.
Yeah.
Would you be willing? I'm gonna throw you out there in front of the audience right now. Would you be willing to come back on and let's discuss everything at a future
Yeah.
time?
Yeah. I mean, there ain't nothing. I mean, I'm 63 years old. You know, there's, yeah, I have no problem discussing that incident. I
And
did for a long time, but
and the paranormal stuff as well.
yeah, no problem.
This
Yeah.
is right. This James. This is awesome.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, or the audience, anybody listening, of why I would be interested in this stuff. And to carry on from that, periodically, because of what I've experienced in the past, I would get some books here and there, and of course, YouTube opened up a lot of stuff and the internet's opened up a lot of stuff. So I would be in and out. Never had time to do field investigations, but I always tried to stay current on what was going on. Reading people like Stan Gordon, Lauren Coleman, and I loved, John Keel, somebody that always thought out of the box,
Yes.
with his books. I was pretty well flesh and blood, nut and bolts, and then I started getting into reading some cases that, just didn't fit, just was outside the laws of physics and things as such. But because of what I've experienced, I had to be very open-minded. And when I dug into some reports, I found out, sometimes what they wrote in the book was just the tip of the iceberg. They left out the stuff that didn't fit, the flesh and blood or the nut and bolt theory, if, of something, phasing through a wall or, looking cloaked, they leave that out. So, I just kind of got a little deep into it. And I said, there's a lot more to this than what some of the books are leading to. And that's what led me to John Keel and a few of the others, and I've always believed in thinking outside the box. So,
No, I agree. And that's what,
Yeah.
with my encounter that happened in '02, with the weirdness of it, and it doesn't fit inside of a box of anything cryptid wise. That's what really spurred me, and I've always, as a kid, I was always fascinated about this stuff, read books, honestly, UFOs, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, ghosts, poltergeist, Dracula, vampires, werewolves, all that stuff. I was into it. I was the weird kid. And even in the military, I was still the weird kid, and I wore it like a badge. But when that night happened to us, it shook me to the core.
Yeah. I mean, it shook me, like I said, nightmares, this and that. And I had no idea what had happened until I went under hypnosis. But it's life changing. Even, I'll mention it now, the one living investigator that's still alive, he said, hey, I volunteered to go. They asked me, they needed a photographer. And I drove for so many hours from, I think he was in northern part of Virginia or Maryland at the time, to Ohio. And he said, I had my doubts, some of the stuff they were telling me, they were seeing, experiencing. And he said, it just didn't make no sense. And I wasn't really open-minded. He said, but man, he said, when I got on that road to that house, something changed. The atmosphere changed. And he said, when I pulled up in that driveway, he said something really felt heavy and I didn't like it. And then he experienced a lot of stuff. And he said he came away very changed. He was never the same afterwards, sold his property, never went in the woods again by himself. Just a whole life changed after what he went through those 2 days that he stayed there. So,
well, I tell you what, so let's go ahead and get into it. Just start from the beginning with the family and go through the events.
Yeah, well, I was on YouTube just bouncing around, like I said, I kind of phase in and out here and there, and I noticed something called Night Siege, and it said 1981, Rome, Ohio. And I want to make sure anybody listening here, it's not Rome, Ohio, it's Rome Township, which is in the northeastern part of the state. There is a Rome, Ohio, that is in the southern part. I think it's bordered by the river to the south. So it can be a little misleading. If anybody wants to look this up and look up the area and the topography and do satellite, look at satellite stuff of Johnson Road, which is a little south of Rome Township in a place called South Fork. They want to look at Rome Township, not Rome, Ohio. But, like you, I investigated and listened to a few of the videos that are up there. I think there's a total of maybe 6 or 7 now, and some of them are just it is what it is. They just report what was in Dennis Pilgis's book, and nothing wrong with that. But it really intrigued me what was in that book. And then there's one video that's maybe 39, 45 minutes. She actually had some photographs that were taken by another individual, the individual that went out there, Mr. Larry A. Peters, the photographer that I was telling you about, that went out there towards the end of it where his life changed. And she incorporated that, but didn't pull too much out of his book. But she had the best. And, I'm kind of like, I wonder if there's anybody that knows more about this other than what they're pulling out of this book. So I went on the internet. I guess it's my intelligence background. I want to know more, and if there's any way and I know how to find things. I'm not computer literate as well as most people are, but I know how to dig a little bit. And within 2 hours, I found, because she mentioned Larry Peters and showed his photographs from his book, I was able to locate him and get his telephone number within 2 hours, which really thrilled me. And I called him and he answered. And I introduced myself and told him I was interested in finding out more about the case. And he said I was one of the few that has reached out to him about this in years. And I think there's a video on YouTube called, I think it's sponsored by Small Town Monsters. And I don't want to criticize anybody, but their researchers went out in the field and they did a good job up to a point. And at the end, they kind of balanced, it might be a hoax. This is the reason why it might be a hoax. I may briefly mention that, or you may ask. And then, why it may have really happened. But the one thing they did mention that really got me to go into this was that most of this data, other than Dennis Pilgis, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, called Night Siege, the Northern Ohio UFO creature invasion, which I think he printed in December of '81, just a few months after the case. They said that, he had passed away. Everybody else was dead. The family was dead. They couldn't find anybody. And I'm going like, you couldn't find anybody, and within 2 hours I could do it. Just somebody behind a computer, but yet you couldn't find this one guy. Because he's mentioned in Dennis's book, all the people that are involved, Dennis mentions, and he doesn't change names except for the family. And he gives another name, but the family that we're dealing with here in the Rome Township are the Lamberts. And you said 3 nights. Well, it is and it isn't. But the primary case itself, when Dennis gets involved, and I'm just going to use first names. I'll say last names occasionally.
That's fine. Go ahead and use the first name.
Yeah, okay. When Dennis, the primary investigator, gets involved, it is in June of 1981. And he is from Roaming Shores, Ohio. So he's not too far out. I want to say he's 1 or 2 hours out. He produces a UFO newsletter and something on Bigfoot, but primarily in Ohio. But he has contacts mainly throughout Ohio, but knows other people. He's got a good reputation. People trust him. He's not easily fooled. I've looked at other statements from other people about this case. Could Dennis be fooled? What his reputation was, and everybody had good words to say about him. There was one person said, well, maybe he could be fooled, because he was really into this case. But he heard about a case in that local area, but not the specific farm owned by the Lamberts, who had moved out there about 1 year before. Now, his book doesn't say it, nor does anybody else. And the one guy that's alive today, Larry A. Peters, he doesn't know if they just moved from the town out into the country or moved from another town. There's no source that, says where they, came from. But they moved on that property about a year before the events. And the primary events that are mentioned in Dennis's book run from June to August of '81. So it's about a 3-month night siege that, some nights are really bad, and then some nights are slow. Some nights don't have nothing going. There's a 1-month period where hardly anything happens. And I'll mention later on, hopefully I will, why that happens. Because in this, and it's really, this case is unusual. When I looked into it, okay, Bigfoot, UFO, and then I found out, as I got into the book, and then I got deeper into it and talk to Larry Peters. So you got several things that happen, and Dennis mentions it, such as in 1980, they moved on their property about a year prior to, and in 1980, Larry, who is the father, he's in his late 30s, early 40s. He served 2 tours in Vietnam and was a sniper in Vietnam. And he's a farmer, and he bought that land. I cannot remember how many acres, but it's got a house, it's got a short front yard, big backyard, and about two plowed fields and a deep field that basically run to the wood line and is bordered by a river to the west, and the same river runs south of the property. And then the only way to it is a dirt mixed gravel road called Johnson Road. And if you look, if you're looking on a satellite or a topographic map, it's pretty easy to find. I mean, I looked up Johnson Road, Rome Township, Ohio, and boom, it showed up. It's not real hard. And it's still, believe it or not, very rural today. There's some fields, there's some homes, a lot of wooded area there. It has not changed hardly at all from what I can gather. So the family itself are the Lamberts. There's Larry, his wife Della, short for Dolores, and they have 2 sons. There's I said, so the father is Mickey. Let me correct you. Mickey, I'm sorry. The father is Mickey, late 30s, early 40s. Wife Della, son Larry, who is a teenager. He is 16, but by the end of this, I believe he's 17. And a young son, Bobby. And Bobby, they don't age him, but Larry Peters, the one living investigator, said that he was probably close to 12 years old. And then you had various friends that came onto the property, such as Cliff and Chris, that actually used guns along with the family. A neighbor, another farmer called Mike, who used firearms on his property. And so, and he mentions it here. Yeah, this gentleman, Mickey Lambert, wants to clear off some woods in his property. It doesn't say why he's doing it. I don't know if it's to get a gas line through, because they put a gas line on his property. And if he's doing this prior to the bulldozer coming out, or whether he's just trying to make a little money or what, but he hires an Amish crew to come onto that property. And it's not too long while they're out there, that this is in May of 81, that they end up having some issues out there. Mickey hears gunfire, and then he goes down to investigate. And of course, they meet him, and it's just males, Amish males, and he questions them about what's going on. They said they've seen some snakes, not to worry about it, but he said they just did. He wasn't sure if he was getting the correct story, and then he noticed their draft horse, because they have a draft horse, to pull the logs out, and he notices some deep wounds in its hindquarters, like some claw marks. And he asks about it, and they're pretty silent. Well, they leave his property, and they leave the feed behind. They take the horse and themselves and get out, and they leave their equipment and their feed behind for almost a month before they return. And when they return, they get what they can and get out. So he's a little suspicious of, I'm just shooting snakes here. And in June of 81, a gas line is put in from the road to running north to south for about a half mile, running through virgin woods on his property. And a bulldozer that's clearing it out, actually, for the gas line and everything, mentions the driver of the bulldozer mentions that, kind of strange, but he had run into an area, a square patch of land with no vegetation or rocks that was about 40 by 40. And he thought it was kind of odd. Said there was 4 holes on it, about the size of 50-gallon oil drums. And it was just kind of weird. And Mickey asked him, well, what did you do? He said, well, I'm paid to clear the land. I just bulldozed right through it. He said, I stopped and looked at it, and just thought it was odd. And I thought I should tell you about it, but I'm here to, I'm paid to get this gas line in. So Mickey noted that. So you got a dead deer that he found that had been gutted and clawed real hard. Something had, taken out the center of it. That was kind of strange. You got the Amish crew that comes in and pretty well, after the gunfire and whatever wounds their draft horse, they leave the property and won't come back for a month, come back and quickly get their stuff. Then you got this bulldozer guy that's saying, hey, I found something weird on your land, but hey, I'm paid to do what I got to do. Just let you know. And then what really kicks this off is on June the 15th of 81, Mickey's, he's a farmer. He's got animals on his property, and he's got 4 ducks and a chicken, and they enter the woods and vanish. And then, later on, he walks the wood line, goes into the woods of his property, and he finds them, with, their heads bitten off and a bite mark on each stomach. And there's large footprints around, claw marks observed in the same area. And so he just buries the ducks because he doesn't want, coyotes or anything. And coyotes were just getting across from, the east of the Mississippi at that time, just here and there. But he just didn't want nobody. He didn't want, anything coming around there. And during that same time, he found a strange sawdust pile about a half mile south across the road. And it was huge and unusual for it to be out there. And he noticed peculiar holes in it. And I did want to mention this: about 10 months prior to the June of 81, his oldest son, Larry, he was probably around 15 at the time. They hadn't been long in that house. It's a 2-story, country home, typical of the time period with a back extension to it. Woke up suddenly in the middle of the night and was screaming. His parents got in there. Now, this is he's probably around 15, but when they get to him and calm him down, he says that he has seen a strange, scary face in his bedroom window that set him off. And it just freaked him out. And his parents, just assumed he had a nightmare, told him he had a nightmare. But this is, it's kind of odd with all the stuff that's going to happen or did happen. As far as the family, this was the first thing that actually started it off when you go back and look at the story. So this takes place, like I said, 10 months before this time period when they start finding, Mickey starts finding some oddities on here. So, and you got a lot of people, according to everything I've read in this book, the book states around 15 witnesses. I put it I think that's accurate. It maybe 16. So you got a case here that probably is borderline, if not paranormal, once you hear all the facts. And you've got 15 to 16 eyewitnesses to at least anywhere from footprints to 3 different types of entities to shape shifting to UFOs, which is very unique. And, and you got a total of 5 investigators. You got the primary, you got another one that is brought in that, witnesses a lot of this stuff along with the primary. You got the third guy coming in, which is Larry Peters, to do the photography, and he witnesses nearly everything those 2 nights. And then you've got 2 other ones, a lady and another gentleman from the local area, that are brought in to, search the grounds, and they see the footprints and some stuff. So it's a unique case where you've got a lot of investigators involved. And I mean, just to think about it, of those 5 investigators, 2 of them actually used firearms. That's unheard of. And I'll mention those investigators in a little bit. So not only are the witnesses, the family, the father and the 2 sons using weapons, but when the investigators come on the field, they're using firearms because the father, obviously being prior military and a sniper, if you're anything like rural folk, there's no such thing as, one too many guns. So he's pretty, obvious that the investigators are Dennis. And just want to mention, he passed away in 2022, and that's the problem. When he ends his book on this case, and if you got a hold of it yourself, he basically says he withholds some information about the boy, the paranormal aspect to it, a little bit about what Larry Peters experienced. He doesn't delve into that. And he says, I'm going to reveal this or add to this, probably through another source or through the newsletter. And nobody knows if he ever published anything in his newsletters. And when I talk with Mr. Peters about it, Dennis was supposed to share a lot of information with him and get that material to him, but he died before he was supposed to. He was going to give a power of attorney to have all the information sent to Mr. Peters because he passed away in let's see, I'm trying to remember here. Passed away February 26, 2022. And it's sad all that information went with him. Nobody knows where it went. You know, he lived with his parents that died before him. He lived in his parents' home. He was taking care of them during this case. So nobody knows where his, you know, obviously he didn't transfer it, you know, to the internet or to a thumb drive that we know of. So all that information's lost or it's in some boxes somewhere. And the only individual we got that can talk about it that actually has some information because of his experience is Larry A. Peters, who, you know, wrote a book that includes Dennis's material, and then he goes on with his own, and it's called Strange Creatures. So the second guy is Willard McIntyre. Now, this is a guy that Dennis
I'm going to pause you real quick before we get into the second guy. So I actually pulled up the map.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and looking at Johnson Road, and there is the Ashcraft Woods Conservation Area off of that road.
Northeast of it. Yep.
And that was put together. That is, you know, a grand total of 379 acres.
Yep, that's correct.
Of protected area. And that was put together and the project started around 2004.
Right.
Ashcraft was the guy that was pushing for it to be done. He passed away due to complications during a surgery.
Yeah.
And then everything was completed about 2008.
Yeah.
And you've got hiking trails, the water area and everything. So it's just kind of fascinating to where we have this major encounter happen, and then right there, all of a sudden, they just built, you know.
Yeah, and if you look on Johnson Road, so that's to the northeast, and you got some fields and stuff north of that. And some of the case actually happens in a cornfield at the time, you know, corn was planted during that rotation, right across from the house. So there's an open field that's a cornfield with probably 4, 5, 6 foot tall corn during that time period that they see some stuff and experience. But most of the activity is if we can find the property, because, I mean, you know, you're looking at it from a satellite, it's probably just best to be on the ground. You may be able to pick out something that I can't. You know, like I said, I'm going to send you the house pictures that Larry A. Peters took. Some of it took place on that side of the road, which is the forested area plus, you know, crops and stuff. But a good portion of it took place west and southwest of the property that ran towards the river. And now where I come from, I'm in eastern North Carolina, that's a big creek, but up there it's a river. So I think it's called the Grand River.
Yep, the Grand River. I think I found it.
Right, and the more you go, before you hit the road to the west, you go over a small bridge.
Yep, there's a bridge right there.
Yeah. And so the property, I think the property can be found by now. See, the house may not even be there now. I don't know. You know, there's still some homes there, but looking at the photo of the home, I mean, somebody could have changed it, added some rooms to it or whatever. I'm sure if somebody could go in the local area and look at deeds in those areas, they could probably find the Lambert family's name, and bingo, they would know exactly where it was. But the property bordered a wood line, and I don't know if the property ran to the river or whether they just, you know, when sometimes you can walk off back then you could walk off your property onto somebody else's property as long as you knew your neighbor and they didn't care.
Right.
You know, I mean, today it would be trespassing, But, you know, in this case, they do go into the wood line and then go down to the river, and they, you know, discover some footprints down there and stuff. And the river runs to the west, and then it curves and goes south. So when I send you the map, you'll have a better idea. And like I said, I updated it from the photographs. You know, Mr. Peters left off one or two things, and I said, nah, you know, the intelligence in me said, no, I can't leave it like this. So I went back, looked at the topography, looked at satellite stuff. I looked at his pictures, and I made my best guess. And of course, I consulted him. You know, I said, hey, you left off a couple of things here, and I'm going to tell you what I did with it. And he approved of it. You know, so But
I think
yeah,
I have the property. Looking at it
yeah,
from what I've heard and from what you described and what I'm looking at now, there's one, two, four houses. It looks like that are built up, or that's a barn, that's a house.
yeah. There
That's
was
a barn. That's another barn. So it's like there's two barns,
yeah.
one
Now
house, and then another house
this
further
will
down.
be his property will be south of the road. It'll be on the southern side.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking. It's
Yeah.
on the southern side,
Okay.
right across, and there's
Right.
a big field.
Okay.
It's a
And
big
at the
open
time,
field.
yeah, at the time you had a 2-story common house, A-frame roof, an extension on the back. You'll see that on the photograph. And he had 2 barns. He had a tool barn and a tool barn and the barn for the horse. And I think they had a cow, excuse me. And then he had a deer rack or a deer hanging thing about 30 foot from the home, where he dressed out as deer, which I've got that on the map too. And they had a path. They had a riding path or a tractor path that divided 2 sides of their field. And on the west side was the field where he had plowed in sections, and there was the wood line. So that's where a lot of the activity takes place right there. But some of it takes place right in his front yard, as we'll get into, and his backyard.
Yeah,
So,
I think I'm looking right at it from what you're describing. It's like there's some fields right there. There's a pond, 2 ponds.
well, at the time there was they only mentioned one. I'm not saying that there won't 2, but at the time they just mentioned 1 pond.
Yeah, that's
And it's just inside the tree line, or at the time it was just inside the tree line, or right at the tree line.
okay.
So,
Yep.
things can change after 43 years.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Between weather and stuff. So, you want me to get back to that investigator?
Yeah,
That
let's
second
jump
one?
into it. Yeah, go into it.
Okay. The first one, like I said, was Dennis. The second guy that Dennis calls in because he's familiar with him and they're friends. He calls in a guy called Willard McIntyre. And he's from a group that I guess doesn't exist anymore, but they work with UFOs and stuff, called the Marcon, Marcon Group Maryland. And I found a little bit on them, but I didn't find a lot of information. But according to Larry Peters, he was a retired naval captain and primary Bigfoot researcher. He lived in the Baltimore, Maryland area during this time period. So, he was between Baltimore, Maryland and Mount St. Helens, because that's where his Bigfoot research was taking him at the time. He was living off his retirement, and he was so deep into this that Larry Peters told me point blank, and he didn't mind me telling me this because he said it was kind of a sorrowful story, but he lost his wife, he lost his property, lost his job. He just got so deep into the Bigfoot phenomenon that he kind of lost himself. That's all he lived for. And you have to be careful, I guess, when you get into areas like this and stuff, that you don't lose yourself or become a religion to you, where you're, there's a place for it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be your priority at all times. So
I'll be honest with you, I'm pretty guilty of that at times.
yeah, it can happen. It can
does.
happen.
I have become. I want to say I'm obsessive over it, but I've started a podcast. I
Yeah.
mean, and
Oh,
doing my own research. And the thing is, for some people, a lot of people who've had an encounter, they've had their one and done. I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with it again.
right.
For others, it's what was that? I need to know.
Right.
And it's sad, and it can become an obsession. It can.
Yeah. And
Um,
it did for him. And Larry tried to track him down after so much time. They lost track of each other. And the last contact that Larry Peters had with him, he was able to track him down to Sacramento, California in the early 2000s. Larry could not remember the exact year, but he said early, and found him in a rest home in Sacramento. And that he was, they would not allow him to talk with him or anything because he wasn't family, but they said he wasn't doing good. So, Larry Peters said most likely he's gone. He's positive. At that time, with the health conditions he was in, even though they wouldn't say what specific it was, he said if Willard McIntyre is still alive, it would be a modern miracle. And of course, with his death, he lost a lot. And I'll mention with him, he was so obsessed with Bigfoot that even some of the people around him, kind of questioned him a little bit, because occasionally, I know you've seen Finding Bigfoot where, they'll hear a tree knock or something will happen and said, yeah, that's a Squatch. Well, that was McIntyre. Every little noise, anything that moved, whatever, it was Bigfoot. Whereas they would go, let's see here, let's investigate this. So he got a little bit of a reputation of being a little overzealous about everything, and everything was a squatch. So that's where some of the researchers that have looked into the Rome Township, Ohio incident have questioned some of these facts or questioned the investigation because Dennis involved Willard in it. And because Willard was so zealous and he was willing to almost believe anything, that's where they try to pull in the hoax. Matter of fact, one researcher, and I cannot remember his name, if I did, I wouldn't even mention his name. I do remember reading it. Some guy from Ohio claimed that Willard is the one that his hoax theory is that Willard got the family involved and hoaxed this thing and pulled a big one on Dennis. And the reason why we don't have anything past Dennis's book on a newsletter or anything, Dennis didn't come out and wrap it up or whatever, was that he found out about it and felt so embarrassed that he himself just let it die. That's their hypothesis, that this was a hoax, that Willard McIntyre, one of his friends, buddies that he called in, Willard was on it from the get-go. He got with the family, paid the family, he used the farm, and all this jive, which was, I can't swallow it, not after what I've seen and what I've investigated. And that he pulled a big one over on Dennis. Dennis later finds out and says, I'll just shut it down and maybe everybody will forget it and it'll go away. I believe personally that Dennis, did some other stuff. It's in one of his newsletters. Nobody can recall. We don't know what his circulation was at the time. It must have been decent because Larry Peters says that he was living at home with his parents, his senior parents. So he didn't have to pay anything but utilities, which they were probably paying for a lot of that. And, his finances were taken care of by his newsletters. So I believe he had more to say, and he did say it, but it was limited to where it went. And when he died, it went with him. That's my personal beliefs. So Willard shows up, and like I said, he's the sore thumb here that some people are trying to point to. He's the only one that they look at as being suspicious because they said they caught him. They said they caught him in a hoax before. I think he got tricked. And just because he's so zealous about a downed UFO and a UFO-naut. That's what they used to call him, an occupant. And he published some pictures on it and, got red-faced because somebody corrected him and said, hey, I can see the wiring in this, da-da-da. So his character got questioned. So when Dennis brings him in, he automatically, the critics here automatically say, okay, because you brought him in and he got fooled, he's probably fooling you, and they're not going to do a deep investigation on it. Then we have the third guy. Whereas Dennis comes in June, Willard arrived in August. So Dennis is there for quite a while, and he's highly impressed. If you read the book, when he showed up, it doesn't say he had any doubts, but you remember he was there investigating another case on a nearby farm and then heard about what was going on at the Lamberts. And then he goes to the Lamberts, and he's, it was a lot deeper than he expected. He was highly impressed. The ladders were up on the side of the house to the roof because, the family was up on the roof, firing off rifles and shotguns at these entities. And, he seeks, they even got coffee cups or something up there. So, they're up there for the duration of the night. They're not up there just for a few minutes or an hour. They're up there, keeping charge and trying to make sure nothing, invades their house. And, but the third guy is Larry Peters, which I mentioned in his book, Strange Creatures. And he includes Dennis's stuff in the front of his book. And then he's got his own stuff and his experiences in the back. And he's there for 2 days, and he's brought in as a photographer, as I've said before. But he is ex-military. He's U.S. Army. If I remember correctly, he is a security police. And he was on a detail for one of the generals for a couple of years. So you know what that type of detail is, where you're, security for a general. But when he got out, he got into insurance. and he got dragged into the mutilation cases out in Wyoming where they sent him. So, he has a background in the cattle mutilations, and he's got some of the pictures in his book, and he's got his own hypothesis on, what was causing that. But I mean, he knew some of the top people in that area, even the state patrolman guy from New Mexico and some other people, Colorado. If you know anything about that history, that started with all that, he was a big part of that in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah, the cattle mutilation is another fascinating topic.
Oh, yeah. And today, I just wanted to mention, too, besides that, he was a PI for quite a few decades, got out of that. He's retired now, but he is a handwriting expert, and he's used by several lawyers throughout the United States. They send him the stuff to look at. He does his analysis, and he sends it back, and he gets paid good money for it. And but he currently lives in Winchester, Virginia. And like I said, I'll make sure that phone number is on the back of the book. He told me today that I can say anything that he's told, relayed to me, and you can feel free to call him or contact him at any time.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, he said, because I wanted to get his permission, one, to use his name. Number two, to send you some of the stuff from his book, which I've sent a few things, and he didn't mind it. I just wanted to make sure I could speak for him of the information he had already relayed to me.
Yeah, and, we won't put his phone number out publicly.
Well, no, it's strictly for you on that one.
Well, I appreciate
if you want to publish the front of his book and Dennis's book, feel free to do so. But the back of the book with his information, you know what? The back of the book with his information, he has it actually online, where I found it. So if you want to do that, you can hesitate and then ask him. But I do believe I saw a photograph online with the back of his book, and he's talking in the background. He put something on a YouTube about 2 years ago and had totally forgotten that it was still up there. So, but
I'll when I talk to him, I'll let him tell me to do that.
That's perfectly fine. I was just letting you know, I don't think you'll have a big problem with that. And then there's two other minor ones that come on. Like I said, Larry Peters is brought on to do photography because they want to document this stuff. They want somebody who knows what they're doing. And because he is a PI and plus an insurance adjuster and everything, and he's been out there doing these mutilation stuff, and they know he's familiar with cameras, knows how to use them, and he goes and takes photographs of the prints and these eyes, which on the photograph appear as one, but there are two distinct red glowing eyes. And note here, these are red glowing eyes. They're not eye shine. They are self-luminant, which, a good many people, testify about. But the other ones are Kathleen Bexler from Ohio herself. She passed away. She walked the property, talked to the family, observed the footprints. And then James Carnes did basically the same thing. So you have a total of 5 investigators, 2 that just come out for the day. Dennis is there for 3 months. Willard's there for about a month. And then you have Larry Peters that comes for 2 days and 2 nights, and that's strictly enough for him. And he does a quick revisit of the property about 2 weeks later. So, but what's interesting about this is that when I get into it and you read Dennis's book, it's astounding. And you mentioned it before, or briefly mentioned it. You have a Bigfoot type. You have shadow men that are shape of humans, but they are totally black, have no features. They have arms, legs, and a body and a head. You have shapeshifters. One that even shapeshifts into one of it tried to mislead him and get them off the roof that was shaped. It was out in the field with the other 2 that looked just like his horse, or the shape of his horse. And after a few minutes of, hey, I know my horse is in the barn. I know it's in there because my horse will not come into this field. That's another reaction thing that I noted in my notes, animal reactions and stuff. That horse refused to come out of the barn and go into that field. So he knew that horse wasn't his, and it, had the same dark look that the other 2 entities had. Then you had one that looked like an owl that fell out of the tree that formed into something with 4 legs that ran off. So you have got a lot of what today we would call inner or extra dimensional to maybe even paranormal, entities. You got 3 or 4 different types here, and that's totally unique to a case. I've never read a case like this with these type of entities on top of UFOs. One which he actually was able to shoot at that went over his head. That's unique in itself. It's almost like all the phenomenon. We've got different groupings: UFOs, Bigfoot, shadow type things, shape shifting, two different types of UFOs, and they're all on this property or around this property. So very unique. And his neighbors, like I said, one of them's named Mike. He experiences something similar. There's a farm on that road, but it is not given. The name is not given. Well, that person has lost 4 cattle and ends up, watching his area at the night, during the night, and he's surprised by a Bigfoot type that picks up one of his calves, starts running. He takes his 30-30, shoots it in the shoulder. He knows he hit it because it shifted and screamed. It dropped its shoulder and took off and jumped over a 4-foot fence, and leaving the mother cow, with severe wounds. So. And Dennis mentions that in his book, but he says they're going to do a follow-up. Well, he never did. So, I put that in my note as secondhand information. It's possible that I believe most likely it did happen. It got back to Dennis, but he was not able to get down there to confirm it, to put it in his book. But, I think it needs to be included in that with everything that was going on. So, but, the family had a good reputation. They lived outside of town. You mentioned that you had heard some stuff, but I couldn't find anything in the town, as far as anybody saying anything. I think the population back then was 700 or 800 in that township. And I'm sure Della worked, I think, in town, but it doesn't mention where she worked. The book does mention that Mickey took his wife into work. She had a first shift job. But it doesn't say where, but I'm assuming it was probably in that township or another town. So, but the family, nobody questioned who they were, their honesty. And like I said, you got a guy that comes out of Vietnam, 2 tours. Most people did 1. So obviously his second tour was volunteer. I don't know if anybody, unless it was something special, but most people that went back for 2 tours were pretty gung-ho, and that second one was volunteer. And he was sniper. The guns, they're not really mentioned in Dennis's book other than shotguns. I think once is 410, but Larry Peters said that Mickey used a 30-06 with a scope. There was a 270 involved, 12-gauge shotgun with double-aught buck magnums. So, but and of course 410 they used with pumpkin balls. If you're familiar with that term.
Yes.
Yeah. So most people are like, what's a pumpkin ball? Well, around here we call slugs pumpkin balls, and they use those for deer. When you hear about a 410, you're kind of like, that ain't nothing. You train that on a kid. Well, take a 410 with a pumpkin ball, and you can generally bring down an average sized deer inside of 50 to 100 yards. Easily,
yeah.
So, it's not as infantile as some people want to make it out. You big, great white hunters, I got to have the biggest elephant gun I can get my hands on. But a 30-06 will do you at 300 yards easy with a scope.
Yeah, that's what we hunted with in Utah was 30-06.
Oh, yeah. They're real popular around here. 30-06. And when I was growing up, it was 30-06 and 30-30s.
Yep.
And if you were young, it was a 410 or a 20 gauge with a slug, so. But, you got these 3 type. I mean, you got 3 different entities, maybe 4. Well, you actually have about 4 when you really think about it. And, the Bigfoot type, I mean, he was able to see that inside of 30 feet. He's at his home. I mean, he's in his home and he's watching TV at 2 a.m. in the morning. If you know anything about military people, which you do, you're a veteran, we have weird hours. Our lives are never the same. Our sleeping patterns are different. So he's up. He hears his dog going off, barking, throwing fits. So he takes his flashlight, goes out the back door, and he's confronted with, he finally looks up. He says, something's kind of odd. Something looks odd at my deer thing over there, which is about 30 feet from the back of the house. He throws his flashlight up on it, and there's this 9.5 Bigfoot type thing with dark, either black to dark brown hair with red glowing eyes, size of ping pong balls, and teeth extension from the bottom of the mouth, not the top, but jetting out the bottom, flat nose, and it's just standing there. And the dog at that time, once he comes out, the dog is actually trying to dig and bury itself underneath the lawnmower. So he yells at, this is right before he sees the Bigfoot, he yells at the dog to quit that, and the dog won't stop. And that's when he looks up and catches, a shape by, his, where he dresses out his deer, which is at 12 foot. So that's how he's able to figure this thing's about 9.5 feet tall, because it's standing right beside it. And it just amazed. Matter of fact, Dennis says in the book, he specifically says about gave him a heart attack. And he quickly retreated back into the house to get the 410, which he always kept. I think Larry said he always kept that by the door. And he brought that out. And when he did it, he saw it running, towards the tree line, and was gone. So that was his first experience with that, and so that's basically in early June. And then, they're out, they're first run in with these what you would call human shaped black forms or shadow type things, takes place on the 25th of 81. They just notice, some stuff going on in the tree line, with these red eyes. But what really catches them on this, what gets their attention to this, the wood line to the west of their property, is that, they're basically seeing, a form, a dark form, waving some sort of black or dark blue light, like a flashlight. And they're kind of like, that's odd. Let's, that's on my property. Let's go check that and find out what's going on. And, they get to that. And sometimes this blue light changes to white, but there's something out there that looks human, dark form. It's got mass, and it's got some type of lantern or flashlight extension to it, and it's dark blue and occasionally goes white. And they go out there. Him and his son arm themselves with 12 gauge shotguns. Him and the 16-year-old. The 10 to 12-year-old, I think he's near 12, if I remember Mr. Peters right. They put him on the tractor and let him drive the tractor down there, and they follow the tractor on both sides, and they get to the wood line and get a look at this stuff, and they're seeing multiple ones in there, and they're seeing strange flashes in the woods. That happened a lot. Sometimes before they saw these red eyes or the Bigfoot or the black forms, flashes of light would just pop out behind the wood line. It's like a predecessor. Maybe something's coming out of a window or something, and so they fire on these things, several times with a 12 gauge. In one instance, you can read in Dennis's book, they're doing a good job. They fire enough. Dennis mentions that they empty out 2 boxes of 12 gauge double alt buck. So, and the reason why I know it's double alt buck, they just basically say that, but Mr. Peters says that that's all he was using was basically double alt buck Magnum. He was not shooting birdshot, anything like that. But they hit one of these black forms, and it falls down by what you were mentioning. I think you mentioned you saw 2 ponds. Well, at the time, they just mentioned this one, and they thought they had finally killed that thing, and 2 more come out to kind of help it, and they fire on it, but they decide they need to back off, so they retreat back to the house, and I think they're about to run out of ammunition. I highly doubt that they went down there. It amazed me that he took what he had, but that goes to show you the military set in your head. If I'm going to go, I'm not going to have just a few shells. I'm going to take what I've got with me. So, but there was a lot of gunfire. They did get screams from these entities. It's these black forms, when they were hit with 12 gauge and then later with rifle fire, you could drop them and you could hear them scream, directly after the fire. So obviously they were solid. But these things would get back up, and they would run away at a high rate of speed. And occasionally they would kind of shift a little bit on all fours. I don't know if they were, shifting, changing their, their shape or what. It doesn't get in detail about that. So the red eyes, they would fire. The red eyes would appear at the wood line, sometimes come out of the wood line. And he associated those with the Bigfoot types, because that's generally when he saw the Bigfoot types at least 2 or 3 times. They had the red glowing eyes, but inside the tree line, it didn't seem to have a body mass behind it. And when they fired rifle fire and double barrel shot, 12 gauge double buck at it, it didn't seem to do anything to anything. The eyes would just move or go out briefly and then come back. The eyes didn't respond to the gunfire like the black shadow shapes. But obviously the shadow shapes had, mass definition because they were responding to it by screaming and hollering. On at least 2 cases, they were went down, and then, quickly got up and moved. So, but, so very, very unusual. And, some people would criticize. I got quite a few liberal friends, but, why do you shoot at something like that? Well,
you're scared.
Yeah, you're scared. You're in a rural area. You're isolated. You might have some neighbors and stuff, but, this is my property. I'm going to defend it. How would you respond? Luckily the thing wasn't, he wasn't armed when he came out the back door. But if I stepped out my back door and my dog is going crazy and trying to dig under the lawnmower, and then I happen to see a shape and I look at it from 30 feet away, and it's 9.5 foot tall, hairy, and got protruding teeth and glowing red eyes, I'm not going to have a conversation with it. I'm not, and I don't have time to be calling the police. Remember back then, these are strictly landlines, Yep. And if you know anything, when you call the sheriffs, out there, sheriff's deputies for the most part that respond, a lot of them, if you tell them exactly what you're dealing with, they're not going to come out. So you have to lie a little bit or fudge it. You got
to come up. I got somebody breaking into my house. Get out here, kind of thing.
Somebody trespassing on my property, and then you hope that they get there, because a lot of times, I've lived in the country and I had to call when some cattle got out and a car hit it and killed it. We called sheriff's deputies. They couldn't get there. Called the state patrol, and it took 1 hour and 15 minutes for the state patrol to show up. So, and they did eventually. His wife Della got so frustrated with it, she calls the sheriff's department twice, one at 5 p.m. and then one at 11. And it's in Dennis's book, and he's actually got it retyped out or reprinted and everything. And they come out and they notice some weird tracks around the house and on the property, and they're armed, which at least one occasion they brought out a shotgun, because back then, they generally used 38s. I don't think they had gone to 9mm. And but the second dispatch actually mentions one of the sheriff's deputies or sergeants actually brings out most likely a 12 gauge, and they generally use deer slayer, a Mossberg or whatever. And they checked the property, but didn't see anything unusual enough for them to stay out there. And then they went back on their patrol. So the family, at least the mother, got upset enough, hey, I'm going to call law enforcement out here. That's documented. And then you have, the local newspaper in the area. I think it's called something Herald, Variety Herald, whatever. But, that covers it. And it doesn't mention the family. It just mentions the rural community and farmers, and, they're seeing things and this is what they're seeing. It doesn't get in depth on it. Is this true? It's strange, etc. You can still get copies of that today, because that one researcher I was telling you about, he wasn't sure if it was a hoax or not, went right to the public library and was able to get it. And I was able to photograph it right off the TV screen. So, but that goes to show you something was happening in the area that the local newspapers knew about. The county sheriff's department knew about it. Neighboring farms knew about it, because they were experiencing something similar, maybe not quite as bad as the Lamberts. And getting back to that, it seems focused on the Lamberts' property, 2 things happen. One, that gas line is put in. It seems like something starts off around it. Now he finds a dead deer prior to that, and of course, the Amish, they penetrate the wood line and they're taking some, so it seems like between, taking some trees down and then running a gas line down there and putting a regulator on it, with a monitor on it, something may have disturbed something that was already there. But here's the kicker: the 16-year-old boy Larry, has seen that face about 10 months before, that horrifying face. Don't know if it's Bigfoot or what. If I saw the face that his father saw from 30 feet away, with a flat nose and fangs out the bottom and with hair on it, maybe that's what Larry, his child Larry saw. We don't know. But Dennis mentions in his book, which is about 40 pages, that he believes that there's a connection between the boy and the activities. And the reason why is because the boy, participates with his father with the gunfire and everything, but he is later, on the rooftop, he gets hit in the head with a light beam, about knocks him off the roof. He gets dizzy and ends up having headaches and stuff. But later on, as this goes on, he starts turning against the family. And he's getting, he's talked about seeing a UFO and getting on it. He's talked about he's hearing these things and they're telling you that you can't kill them with gunfire. They don't like your noise. They don't like the noise. They're scared of water and they don't like sunlight. It's like he's communicating with these things. And he's getting anti-family. It's to the point where they actually have to take the 12 gauge from him, because they've armed him before to help out. And some other anomalies happen that, they go to the pastor, and the pastor says, after what you've told me, it sounds like the boy needs an exorcism. They pour water on the boy's hands, and it goes through his hands, not around his hands, goes through his hands, directly to the ground. He's starting to have nightmares, and they put a Bible in his hands. His father gets to the point, says, puts a Bible in his hands, and his father swore up and down that the Bible started smoking in his hands. And he asked the boy to recite a prayer, and the boy got agitated and refused. And the mother had to calm him down and separate him from the family. And when they removed this boy from the property for 1 month to send him to his grandmother's, a lot of what they were seeing and experiencing died down. Then when they brought the boy back on the property, when he seemed to come to his senses, got quieter and wasn't as agitated being away from, they just thought it was too much for him. When he got back on the property, these manifestations quickly returned. So Dennis thinks that there's something paranormal. He alludes to it in the book. You have your opportunity to read it. He alludes to there's a facet that there may be something paranormal to this. And if it's not paranormal, whatever these entities are, whether they're ultra or interdimensional or whatever, nuts and bolts, ET type or whatever, they're connected to this boy. They're focused on this boy. So, and the boy tries to get his father and the other investigators to stop investigating and stop firing on these entities. So that's a paranormal aspect that Larry Peters actually gets deeper into the book. He's the one that revealed that the father, handed him the Bible and his hands started smoking, or the Bible started smoking, and the water passed through his hands, and that he was belligerent. He was against saying any type of prayer. And that, like I said, and they went to the pastor. The family was not religious, as far as, churchgoers, but Larry Peters mentions at the end of it that Mickey became a devout Christian, after they moved into town. I think somewhere that fall they gave up the property and moved into the town. So it very, very strange, very, very strange.
When they gave it the property and moved back in the town, did the activity stop? Did they have any activity in town?
That's what I don't know, because of what Dennis, he says in the end of his book. There's much more to this, and I've got additional information, and he leads you to believe he's going to either do another book or he's going to put it in one of his two newsletters. Like I said, one's on UFOs and one's on Bigfoot. But he will reveal this, and he never does. And I don't know if the reason why is because he's got other cases he's working on, or whether he does. But like I said, it's a limited literature pamphlet piece, and it only goes out to so many people. Unless somebody can dig up something from that time period, we'll never know if he actually did that. He may have, but people get a newsletter. A lot of people didn't file them. When I was a kid or a young adult, I filed them for a while, but a lot of times I would just throw it away after I read the information. Didn't hold on to things.
Yeah, same. I mean, that was the same way.
Yeah, he may have, finished it up. But from what I can get from Larry A. Peters, the third guy brought in, the third main investigator, did the photography and stuff. If he remembers correctly, he's 84 today. The family sold the property in the fall and moved into town. Now, whether the new people that came out experienced the same thing, or once the family was gone and the boy was gone, who was the lightning rod, I think, I don't know. I think they were attracted to the boy, and I don't think the boy manifested it. I don't believe it was poltergeist activity in, different forms, because poltergeist, if you do your research, noisy ghost, whatever, it doesn't come in forms. It doesn't come in entities. You get something moving around the house, some noises, maybe some stones thrown on your rooftop, things out of place, etc.
Same thing that you get with some Sasquatch encounters as well.
Right. You get that, but you don't get, you get poltergeist type activity with Sasquatch, but you don't, normal poltergeist activity through a teenager generally doesn't manifest. Yeah, it doesn't manifest physical forms.
Yeah,
that react to gunfire.
Let's jump into the teenage son real quick, because I was writing down notes and stuff, and one of the notes I made, because if you listen to the description of the creatures from the red eyes, which obviously is not natural, then you have the shadow folks with the blue light. Then, sometimes switching over to white. I also know that they baited with rabbits. I know that they've done. The family did a whole bunch.
I was going to get to that. Yeah.
So they baited with rabbits, trying to, obviously, kill these things.
Yeah.
So So one thing that's always stood out to me about this is the possibility of the Fae folk being involved, and with the Amish coming in and doing what they were doing, having their weird encounter, the pipeline being put in, and like you mentioned it as well, something maybe possibly could have gotten disturbed, something fired up, and they may have upset the Fae. I will tell you, in places like Iceland, when they're building roads, they go out of their way to avoid fairy areas and trolls and stuff. They will detour the road completely.
Yeah. You remember what I said, the guy that was working for the gas company, that was clearing that area out so they could put the line down through the property and the adjacent property. I'm sure it wasn't just on his. He finds a 40 by 40 square type area that's devoid of stuff, and it's got strange barrel-like holes in it. And he says, "Well, that's odd. I'll report it to the guy, but hey, I'm
just
paid."
Plows right through it.
And he plows through. So obviously, if that's deep in the woods and it's clear to vegetation, nothing's growing, and you got holes in there the size of regular oil barrels. Yeah, I'm not saying what he did was wrong. I probably would have done the same thing. But it seems like they disturbed something, and I'm not taking anything away from the boy. I've done my research too. If you got somebody that's, I don't even like you to use the word psychic, but more open to certain types of things, even with UFOs, with the ET types and stuff, they will gravitate to somebody in the family that they can communicate with, that is, maybe got a certain behavior, more open, or somebody they can tap into. And I think that boy was it.
Okay, so this was the 16-year-old kid, correct?
Yeah, the 16-year-old kid is Larry.
So the 16-year-old kid going through this stuff, he's in puberty still.
Yep, sure is.
So, and if you also pay attention to, not only a lot of poltergeist activity does gravitate towards young teenagers, going through puberty, generally focus on the female versus the male. But males are, they can get attracted as well.
Yeah, I'm not saying
1981 as well. Yeah. So you're going back in time, this for me, there was the huge satanic waves that went through our country.
Oh yeah, big time.
And a lot of people were curious; they were interested in it, and the media hyped it up so much Dear Lord, from serial killers to
Oh yeah,
music, heavy
yeah,
metal,
oh
hard
yeah,
rock bands, heavy metal bands,
oh yeah.
everything was,
Satan was under every rock.
yes. And
Yep.
for a lot of teenagers, being teenagers and being rebellious, getting curious about that.
Yeah.
As I
Now,
talked at the beginning of the show, when I was bringing these books home, my parents were kind of giving me some strange looks,
oh yeah, my
you
mother
know,
gave me the same.
until I brought home a book on Satanism. And it wasn't because I was going to practice this. I was curious,
Right.
know thy enemy kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, the way I look at it is, the best way to beat somebody is to know what they believe.
Yeah.
And so,
Definitely.
now, granted, my mom drove me back to the library and made me return it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that was the only time they panicked. And that is part of what was going on through,
Yeah.
the 70s
Now,
and 80s.
yeah. Now, Larry Peters was in the house a few times and spent the night in there one night, but he didn't go through all the rooms or anything. He said they were a normal family, a loving family, good communication, did have a lot of guns. Both boys were trusted with the guns. You're raised that way, especially if you're raised by a veteran that saw combat.
Yeah, I was raised that way with guns in the
Yeah,
home.
gun safety. I mean, my brother-in-law was raised in the country, killed his first deer when he was 4, and my nephew, who is his son, killed his first when he was 4. Put him on a deer trail, gave him a 410 with a slug in it. You wait right here. You point your gun this way. You see this. That's the way people were raised back then, and still are in parts of the country. But Larry, Larry Peters, even though he mentions the water passing through the hands, he said he didn't see it. The family members said they saw that. They were pouring water on his hands because he had gotten them dirty, and the water went through his hands. That he was holding them open, but nothing. I mean, it was just going straight through. It wasn't going around,
Yeah,
and
overflowing.
the smoke, and being, not wanting to say a prayer, and it's setting you off to the point where you grab a 12 gauge, and the family quickly takes it away from him because they're kind of like, he may use it on us. Something ain't right with the boy. And then bringing a pastor in, the pastor says, hey, I'm suggesting, an exorcism of the boy. And what they do is they remove him from the situation. They remove him to, off the farm. Whatever's going on this farm, it may be connected to him or it's amplified through him. We don't believe he's causing it, but it may be amplified through him. It's affecting him. And we're having poltergeist activity, but, and I'm not denying that poltergeist activity didn't happen. But what I'm saying is, as far as I know, poltergeist activity alone does not manifest entities that are solid form and can cast shadows from a flashlight.
True.
And can be hit and hurt with gunfire. If you can tell me a case from Germany, I don't care if it's a century ago with the musket fire, if you can find one, please correct me.
No, you're right. But this brings me back to the fae.
Yeah.
The fae folk, though. A lot of people don't realize, and I'm a firm believer in that the fae are behind a lot more of our paranormal and super, and our cryptid encounters that we have out there.
Well, obviously, you know more about them than I do. I know the terminology, but I don't know as much about them as you do.
Well, okay, so they're not Tinkerbell from Peter Pan.
Right.
I will state that one. They are mischievous. They are untrustworthy. They're tricksters. There's so much to the fae. It's crazy. They will make deals. So I mean, there's so many rules. Like you don't give them your name, you don't do this, you don't do that. And so going through the sun, when this thing got plowed, when the
right.
open area was plowed through, stirred them up, got them fired up. Maybe the first person they encountered was the teenage son. Where Larry is now the target, and it's not necessarily the target, but he's like, hey, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, he's the conduit.
Yeah, this is kind of cool. Conduit. I'm able to do this stuff, and it opens up a whole can of worms.
Yeah,
and these things are fighting back of what took place. But the month of him being gone, though, that's what strikes me as odd. Right, the month of him being gone and the activity dies.
Yeah, it doesn't totally cease, but it's. They still see some lights. They still see some activity, but it doesn't come up to the house to the point where they have to open up gunfire. And so it's very minimum. The presence is there, but it isn't aggressive. It's not coming out of the wood line. It's not leaving footprints around the front of their house. It's not bothering their dog. It's not killing anything anymore. Seems like it's backed off, and I did want to mention, so, with this thing again, they get up on the rooftop, and you mentioned, the forested area that you saw on the satellite photography.
Correct.
Well, in that area across on the road, if you'll notice, some of it is farmland, that's around that forested area. They have a cornfield, and when they're up there, they notice a light in that cornfield. So for the first time, it's not in the wood line that's to the west or southwest. This is the cornfield north of the house, north of the road, towards that forested area that you're talking about that's in the northeast quadrant. They notice a white light in that cornfield.
Yeah, it's a big cornfield. Looking on the map, it's a big cornfield, and and they're across the street from it. Yeah, I mean, I've got their house right here.
Yeah, and that light produces a beam that comes out and hits Larry in the head, and he almost falls off the roof. He gets himself back up. He claims for days after that he gets migraines and stuff from it. But they take a shot at that light, and the light vanishes. And then they see a small coal or red coal-like light in the sky above the tree line, and it settles in the tree, and it changes from a red coal-like object about the size of a tennis ball, a little smaller, that's self-luminescent, to an owl. It's shaped like an owl, and they let go on it, and they don't know if they hit it or not, but it drops from one limb to another as they're firing on it. And when it hits the ground, it changes shape again into some type of black form that's Dennis does not say exactly what it changes into, but it's on all fours. It's got 4 limbs. So it goes from a red coal self-luminous light to an owl-like entity in the tree branches. But once it falls with a thud on the ground, which means it's solid, it changes into a different type of mass, a larger mass on 4 limbs, and quickly exits the area screaming. And when they get over to the area where that tree was, the grass and the ground is disturbed. No blood, anything such as that. So that's definitely shape-shifting. Yeah, so it goes from, within minutes, it goes from a light source to an owl-type thing that, some type of bird, and when it hits the ground, it goes into some type of mammal shape and splits out of the area. And as I mentioned before, when they saw those 2 dark entities and fired on them, the dark, those dark human-like shadow people, it did mention in the book, occasionally it got the shadow forms would exhibit a slight white halo around the edges of the body, occasionally. And, and as I mentioned before, one of the third entity in the field, took the shape of his horse, and he knew it wasn't his. He had to kind of gives you an idea. He had to think a little bit. My horse is in that barn. I know the horse is in the barn. I checked on him earlier, and my horse will not come out on this field. Ever since we've had these problems out here, he will not enter this field. That's not my horse. And fired on it, and hit it, screamed and hollered, and it went off. So Bigfoot types, the red glowing eyes occasionally did not have mass forms behind them. Even though the Bigfoot types had the red glowing eyes, the ones inside the wood line that they were firing at, they could not see a shape behind those eyes. And sometimes the shapes actually, went very high. They were as high as 14 or so feet off the ground and as low as 2 feet. Matter of fact, one of the Bigfoot types they shot went down, and Larry Peters said he watched it crawl away like a spider. That's rare. There have been some reports of Bigfoots getting low and crawling. And when they went to the area, they found the drag marks, it going back into the wood line.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer the spider crawls more than likely more of a they do that more than they're given credit for than we see.
Yeah, well, this book mentions it. I decided to look a little bit and thought, hey, there are a few cases, where it does a spider-like crawl. Well, if I'm getting fired at and I figure keeping low, it's got some form of intelligence. But I did want to mention occasionally there were red eyes that did not have a mass behind it that they could see. And but the entities themselves had shape. They had mass. They cast shadows. Even the Bigfoot type later on in the book, you'll read that they fired on that was just it popped outside the wood line in a gap, and they fired on it when they hit it with the flashlights. It turned sideways, and the flashlight beam was still on it. The body cast a shadow, so there was basically depth there. There was mass. So at least twice they were able to see some type of mass. So it wasn't just a projection. You know, it wasn't, oh, I'm just seeing things. You know, it's not being projected in my head, or it's not being projected in the field for two reasons. One, it casts a shadow. Number two, it's reacting to my bullets. You know, it occasionally it will go down or at least scream when I pop into it. So, and getting, you know, you're a hunter. If you get hit with a 30-06 inside of 100 yards, you know what it can do to you. Even a 30-30, even a 410 with a slug on it, you know, will definitely do some damage.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100%. And that's one part too that drives me nuts about this encounter with what they were having, is they were hitting it. And I mean, they discussed that it was hit. They would see him drop and get up.
Yeah.
And there's the one to where the one was being helped out.
Yes. Yeah.
Which
by
is
the pond.
Yeah, over there by the pond. And
Yeah.
then so, but it's the whole thing is just so, I mean, fantastical, and
Well-
not in like, you know, it's, you know, a Hollywood made up story, but I mean, it does almost fit a Hollywood narrative to a point.
Yeah, and it does. It does.
I don't think it was hoaxed. I'll be honest with you. I really don't
no.
think at all.
No, I'm gonna let me go over something with you real quick. I decided to write out a few things just for the heck of it. Arguments against the hoax. You got 15 to 16 witnesses, okay, and even 44 years later, not one witness that we know of that's alive, and even those that have passed on, but not one of them has come forth and said they were part of a hoax. Okay, now just think about that. The more, if you're going to create a hoax, are you going to get more people and more investigators involved, or are you going to try to keep it as small as possible?
No, well, if I was to create a hoax, it would be me and somebody else.
Right. You
And
don't
then
get
I
more
would
people involved.
blow it wide open. The more people yeah, so it's like a secret. The more people you tell a secret, it's no longer a secret.
There you go. It's like when we were in the military, I was in intelligence. The less people that you knew, the only people when we did missions, whether it be nuclear, conventional, it was the less people that were involved and less people knew, the better off you were to keep that classified until the mission was finished.
Exactly.
And we had a thing such as, look, I had a top secret clearance that even went above top secret in some aspects. I would have somebody in the next office that was in an intelligence group and could come in and say, "What are you doing?" I'm kind of like, "I can't tell you." And they said, "Well, I got a top secret clearance." I'm going, "But you don't have the need to know." Just because you got a top secret clearance doesn't. So it's just one of those things. The more people you get involved, the more likely it's going to be exposed sooner or later. Somebody's going to slip. Hey, I pulled a fast one on you.
Well, the same point. So yeah, and when I was stationed at Fort Riley, I worked at I got tested G4, okay, in Kansas, and the readiness department. That was special duty, and they were like going, "Hey, Orton, we're gonna hook you on up. You're gonna get 3 months in the office during the wintertime." I was like, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I got there, like, you know, I had, I just had the confidential clearance, and right off the bat they said, "Nope, you need secret." And I was like, "Oh." So they got me secret. I was able to get the secret, but I walked to the office one morning, even after I had the secret, and my job was I would go through all the readiness of the division. I'd go through the reports in the morning, what vehicles were down, how many vehicles were this, how many vehicles were that. Then I have to go up and sit down and brief the general on every morning. You know, here I'm this little specialist. It was kind of cool. You just walk in and go, "Hey, sir, how are you?"
Yeah.
And you go, "Hey, Orton, want a cup of coffee?" You're like, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "All right, how bad are we this today?" You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I walked in and they said, "Oh, you're no longer in here." I was like, "What?" They moved me across the hall. No lie, into where they had other cubicles, and they said, "Pick one." And I was the only person in there with a cubicle. There was nobody else. I was the only person. And so I had to go knock on the door if they needed me to do something, or they'd come and say, "Hey, Orton, you know," but I could not go in there.
Yeah.
So
Oh
because
yeah.
it was a need to know, and I
Well,
did not need to know.
yeah. My job, basically my last 3 years, I worked in like a bank vault. Our door to enter, was 2 foot thick, and it was like a bank vault door. We had a cipher lock. You went there. You didn't touch that door. You called security police, gave them your access code, and they would give you something back, and da da da. And you went back and forth. Then they would tell you to dial that thing. And then when you got through, the alarm went off, and then you had to do something else to get the alarm turned off before you even went in the back. But like I said, and just think about this: 5 investigators were involved. That's highly unusual. Because most people want to keep it to one or two. They don't want to share it with everybody. But Dennis wanted another person. That other person wanted another person. Hey, I want you. So obviously Dennis wasn't, restrictive about this. He wanted to share it. He wanted other people to experience it, etc. And just think, of the 5 investigators, 3 of them had close experiences with nearly all these entities and shapes, forms, one UFO at least, and 2 of them got involved with gunfire. I don't know of any case involving UFOs and what was reported. Investigators generally, when they get on the scene, it's after the fact. They might experience a little bit here and there, but 3 of the 5 experienced nearly everything, saw what the witnesses were seeing and hearing, the prints, the entities. I think 1 UFO. They didn't see the first one. But having said that, of these 3 that saw this, 2 of them participated in gunfire. They were given weapons, and they were afraid enough to participate in gunfire. Now, I don't know of any case, UFO or Bigfoot type, where that's happened. Normally you want to stand back and observe, and you know what I'm saying. You don't want to be involved. But
most investigators do come in at after the fact of it happening,
right?
Especially when it comes to UFO and alien abduction.
But this phenomenon is continuing, and it involves, and Mr. Peters, Larry Peters said, hey, I drove there with Willard. He picked me up from Maryland. I drove with him, and I was kind of standoffish and humph. He's telling me what's going on, briefing me. You got your cameras. Willard wants to know if he's got his camera. Yeah, all this other stuff. And, but he is coming in with an attitude. Mr. Peters is coming with an attitude. This cannot be going on. This is just too much. Okay, 1 Bigfoot, 1 UFO, but you're seeing all these things, and this is what the family, and this is what you've experienced. Nah, I'm not going to believe. But he said once he got on the road, something changed. Once he got on Johnson Road, he said the atmosphere changed. And once he pulled in front of that house, he said you could feel the heaviness. And he said it didn't. He said it felt spooky. That's his exact words verbally. He told me the first conversation. He said it felt spooky. He said I didn't want to get out of the car. He said I got out of the car, and he said the only reason why I stayed there for 2 days and 2 nights. One night was in a motel. One night was at the family home. A nearby motel was there. I think the first night, second night, they were at the family home. But he was impressed, but he was scared to death when he took the pictures. The first night he was there, it just blew him away what he was seeing and taking pictures of while they were firing on these things. He got back in the car, locked the door, and that's when he said the first communication came to him. So we have the boy, what's going on, and the boy they're saying that they do not like the gunfire. It's not your bullets. They don't like the noise, and they hate water, and they don't like light, and you need to leave us alone, etc. And the boy got agitated and didn't participate towards the end. He was not wanting to participate.
Okay, so I'm going to pause you real quick. This is twice now you've mentioned it, and the first time you mentioned the water thing, I was like, what's going on? So there's a movie that was released called The Watchers, and it's M. Shalamanite's daughter who did it.
I remember hearing about it. I never saw it.
So amazing movie.
Yeah.
But what's really funny, though, is in it, so if you haven't seen the movie and you plan on watching the movie, be ready for some spoilers here. Really, really quick, folks. Okay. So you might want to fast forward a little bit. In the movie, they are being watched by fae folk. Mm-hmm. They're trapped and everything. And the way to get away from them is the water because they're afraid of the water.
Right.
In this movie that was released last year.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're telling me the son, you've mentioned it twice now, has said that they don't like the water.
Yeah, they
So
don't like.
that goes
Yeah.
right back to the Fae.
But you remember that entity was shot, fell near the pond. Didn't say he was in the pond. Didn't say he was going. He was standing close enough to it that when he failed, they used the pond as a reference. Then So yeah, and then they did find a footprint when they went beyond the tree line into the back area of the Grand River, which, like I said, back here we would call it a large stream. They did find a footprint, but they didn't find it in the water or in the mud. They just found a footprint near the river.
Yeah,
and that's not unusual. But yeah, the boy.
It's a 3-toe track.
Yeah. Now, see, that's another thing. I want to say this real quick, but when Larry Peters got back to the car, he pulled out his roll of film that he had shot, that particular roll of film, and that's when he got a message in his head that basically said, "You've got something we want. You weren't supposed to do that. You were not supposed to take pictures of us." And he thought about destroying it, getting rid of it, and he said, "I quickly put it back in my pocket." And so whatever was out there was trying to tell them that what he did, they didn't like, because he's using, obviously they know what he's done. I did want to mention this. Let's see, just for your audience and yourself, the two cameras he had, it was a Kawa, Kowa Super 66, 2.25 by 2.25 large flash. And his second camera was a TIEN TAX 10 tax 35 mil, which had a 400 SAS color film. So, and when they did send the photographs, or when he sent them in, Dennis sent some in, he sent some in. The ones that he sent in with the eyes, the red eyes, which on the film showed as one, but he said, "I'm telling you, they were two distinct ones. But when I took a picture and on the negative, it shows as one," because they were only like 2 to 4 inches apart. And when you take a photograph at 25 to 100 yards, you don't get separation sometimes. But the lab there, and I don't know which lab, he didn't say which one. You could probably ask him. He said the lab, with the technology they had at the time, showed that there was no mass behind the light source. The eyes were there, but there was no mass.
So I'm wondering, with our technology today, if we could get a hold of the negatives and what we could do.
Look, he may still have them. You would have to ask. He may have some of them. Dennis had some of the best ones. Dennis asked for them from him, and he sent his negatives to Dennis. Dennis sent them to another lab, and Dennis basically never got those back to him, and it has upset Mr. Peters to this day that Larry didn't get it back. And they had a long conversation, and Dennis kind of said, "Well, what happens in Ohio stays in Ohio." So it may be one of those where Dennis got a little greedy. I'm just being, just throwing it out.
Okay, James.
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick. So this is what I'm going to do. Hang on one second.
Yeah.
136.50. I am going to pause this because I have to go to the bathroom. Hang on.
Oh, okay.
So,
and I'll wait right here for you.
Yep. So let me stop it real quick. Hang on. Yeah. I was thinking, since you mentioned that about, Dennis and maybe possibly being greedy, do you think that maybe he had the same communication that Larry did? That you shouldn't be capturing this, and so maybe he was a bit more susceptible, so he was trying to collect all of it up to kind of get rid of it, and maybe that's why he never followed up with anything?
Hey, that's a possibility, because Larry said he acted odd a little bit, like he wanted to share and everything, but it was one of those things. He made that odd statement: what happens in Ohio stays in Ohio. And at the time, Mr. Peters, I think at the time he was living, where he's at now in Winchester, Virginia. And so he was, a little upset that his negatives weren't returned. I do believe he has some, but I'm not sure what he's got. Obviously, he has some if he printed them in his book. So you may be able to get access. You would have to find out exactly what, he may not have the negatives. He may just have the prints. I've done that myself, on some certain things. Back in the old days, I got the prints, but ask me where the negatives are, and I can't tell you.
Yeah,
So,
I got boxes of photos when I
yeah,
was in the service, and same thing. I have some
yeah,
negatives, but not all of
yeah.
them.
You mentioned the footprints. That's the other thing that proves that these things had some type of mass. Well, the Bigfoot entities, I think 2 or 3 times that they were engaged, left generally behind. Most of the time, they found, 5-toed prints that were 18 inches long. I mean, that's pretty significant. That's generally what you find in the Northwest. In the South and places, they tend to be 14, anywhere between 12 and 14, occasionally 16. But I mean, these are huge. And the prints are found in the front yard, the driveway, and near the front window, which, early on, the boy has that nightmare, or they tell him he's had a nightmare. He has seen a face in his window, you know. Um, and on this one particular one, it says here the ground was initially damp, when this print was probably produced. And yet, 12 hours later, the ground around it is totally dry, because normally in the morning, when you find something or whatever, your grass is wet, your ground, but the print itself is still sopping wet, like it's retaining water, which was kind of odd. The black forms, generally when they were shot at or they moved or and the witnesses went out to the area, and even later, they generally find 3-toed prints, with those entities that run between, maybe 14 inches, not quite as big, and 5 to 7 inches across. You'd have to read the book. I'm just going off the top of my head here, but they tended to be a little smaller. I think Dennis mentions that the heel seems to be striking first on on both of them. And a little bit more of a deeper depression on the hillside, and maybe some scuff marks, and some odd hoof prints, as mentioned at least, I think, twice, odd hoof prints. But I don't know what they mean by that. Is that horse-like? Is that deer-like? They just said odd hoof type marks. So you got 3 types of prints that they're seeing here. And so that leads to the validity that there's something solid with mass, with weight, that is there at certain times with the entities. With the eye, just seeing the red eyes that are self-luminous, that range from 2 or 3 feet off the ground to like 12 or 14, they don't necessarily find prints, where those lights were. And sometimes they said they actually saw the lights almost, I don't even want to use the word because he's not using it here, floating, but they seem to move and bob. So I don't know if they're, and as he stated in his, with his film analysis of his negatives, they couldn't find any mass, or the technology then couldn't find any mass behind. They couldn't detect any form or mass behind the glowing eyes that he took pictures of. So
yeah, which has fate,
yeah,
signature right there, because they're,
yeah,
there's some encounters out there. People think they're seeing a Sasquatch in the woods, and there's something with red glowing eyes, and they follow it, and as they're chasing it down, and then they realize that it's standing off of a cliff, pretty much.
yeah.
And like taunting them to come. All they can see is the eyes, and if they'd have kept pursuing it, they would have fallen off this cliff.
Well, you kind of mentioned you kind of bring this to thought. Well, towards the end for Larry Peters, they have some gunfire in the tree line and everything, and it calms down a little bit. They come back up to the house, and Willard actually shoots one in the backyard. A form comes up near the barn. He lets loose, and they talk with him about, hey, what did you do? What'd you see? Well, I saw this Bigfoot type thing, and I called out to it, and it didn't answer, so I unloaded on it. And they come back towards the front of the house, and calm down a little bit and talk. And well, 2 of the family members, Mickey and his wife Della, they're armed with rifles, and they give Larry Peters a 12-gauge shotgun, single break, so single shot, and give him 2 or 3 rounds of double alt buck. And he loads one in, and they walk down Johnson Road in front of the house. And the husband and wife get a little, I think he says about 30 feet in front of him. He said the only light source they have is the front porch light, which in pitch dark is pretty good for that time. And he said, and I can see forms. I can tell where the road's at, and I can see where the bush line, the trees are at in the open field, with the corn. And so, but Mickey starts seeing, red eyes down that way, and he starts engaging them. Then it quietens down, and then Larry says all of a sudden it got quiet where I was. And I didn't notice any insects whatsoever. He said I had a cornfield on one side to the north and a small tree line and bush area behind me to the south, on the house side. And he said I heard something moving in the cornfield. And he said, and I was staring at it to see if I could see anything. I didn't want nothing coming right out at me. And he said, so I kind of, brought my gun up. And then he said, I heard a twig snap behind me in the wood line. He said, and I turned around, and he said, I focused my eyes and realized that there was a gap in the bush line. The bushes were about, they were kind of high, but this one particular area was only about 4 foot high. And there was a gap where trees were behind it, but there was a noticeable gap that he could tell. It was darker, in his own words. He said, I could tell there was a gap there. And all of a sudden, those red glowing eyes the size of ping pong balls, and he said they were about 4 inches apart, appeared no more than about 20 feet from him in that gap. And he said, I stared at it, and you mentioned it earlier. He said, I stared at it, and it kind of brings me back to what you just said. He said, I stared at it, and he said, I felt like it was taking control of my mind. And he said, I panicked. I brought the gun up, and I fired right at it from 20 feet away. And he said it had no effect from 20 feet away. And the Lamberts, the husband and wife, came down to him and asked him, what he was shooting at. And he told them, and of course they didn't see anything. And they, hightailed it out of there and went back to the house. And the next morning, this is something interesting. We talked about the guy with the bulldozer that was, helping clear out the area for the gas line. Well, they go back to this gap where he fired at because Larry wanted to see that area. Did I see a gap there? And sure enough, there was a gap there, and they were able to enter it. Yeah, separate the bushes a little bit because it's only 4 foot high. They went into that gap area, and the reason why it looked the way it did at night, he could tell that there was something different about the area. They went in there, and there was a 60 square foot circle with no large trees, some small ones. If you get his book called Strange Creatures, you'll see several pictures where there's little vegetation. There's some small limbs, small tree-like things, and a lot of them are snapped, but with little growth, and it looks very odd to be where it's at. I mean, it's just odd, not to have some grass in that area, and the few things that has, it just dumbfounded them. This is just odd, and it's not far off the road, and it's on the southern side of the road, and just inside the tree line. And if it wasn't for the bushes, you'd see it. And he said something, started making some big sounds in there, and they got their rear ends out of there. They felt something was coming, and they broke out of it. But they went back and took pictures, and that's where they hung the rabbits at. I don't know if they mentioned that, but it's in Larry's book, and Larry Peters will tell you that when they investigated about the rabbits, because you mentioned it, Willard come up with the idea. It has killed your ducks, killed your ducks, bitten their heads off. Same thing with a chicken. It killed and gutted that deer, left claw marks on it. It's attacked 2 other animals, the Amish draft horse and the farmer's cow that took the calf off. Obviously, it eats in some form or fashion. Let's put some cyanide in there, a capsule, and see if it'll take it, eat it, and if it's physical form, maybe we can kill it that way. That was Willard's thinking. And they put it, under the crates. They tied it down, to a rod that they drove into the ground with 1,200-pound parachute test cord, if I remember right, and put the crate over it. I don't know if it was plastic or metal. Back then, most of them were metal. You put milk and stuff in.
Yeah.
And they had the 3. And the weird thing is, Mickey left that morning, I think at dawn, maybe around 6 or so, to take his wife to work. He checked on the rabbits. He saw them, no disturbance, comes back, doesn't see anything unusual, gets back in the house, and the boys are still asleep, and he falls back asleep. The investigators show up, Dennis, Willard, and Larry Peters, and they ask, they go up to the house. You seen anything? No. And they go out and check. One rabbit's missing. The test cord is snapped. It's not, it's not cut. It's snapped. And I think Dennis sent it to some place and said that some type of extreme force was used on snapping it. And they hypothesized that because a footprint of 5 toes that was near it was that whatever it was, the Bigfoot type, they were hypothesizing, grabbed the rabbit, snapped the cord, and its foot slipped off the crate and just put that, the fore part of the foot down. And they noticed the middle crate, the rabbit had a hole in its stomach, which was odd. And the third rabbit was perfectly fine. So, but they took the live rabbit, they killed it quickly. I don't know if they shot it, slit its throat, whatever, it doesn't say. And Larry didn't, I guess Larry could tell me. That's just one question I didn't ask. And they hung it in that void area that they found right off of Johnson Road, the one that, Larry shot at the eyes. And they tied it there with test cord, high on the ground. I've got a picture of that. That's not in his book. He actually thought that he didn't take a picture of that. And about 2 weeks ago, he actually found the negative. And so I asked him if I could find it, if I could have it. And he didn't send me the negative, but he sent me the picture. And he said about a week or two, they came back as a follow-up. They didn't spend the night. They were in the area. And they went and found that the rabbit had been stripped. It had been gutted and had like razor marks on it, which kind of scared Larry Peters a little bit. He said whatever came for that rabbit wasn't normal. It didn't bring the animal down. It just kind of clawed at it or stripped it. So that was the last on that.
Might have left the calling card like, you're going to throw this out here at us. This is what we're going to do.
And, we have that. And we also have the animal reactions. I mean, the dog, what it did, barked heavily, tried to bury itself, dig a hole and get under that lawnmower. And then, when the Lamberts and Peters go down the road, in Peter's book, he mentions that the 2 house cats follow them, and they're perfectly fine, just playing casual. They follow them, and he can see them behind them, their little forms, and but when the sounds go off and he does what he does, I mean, before he concentrates on that gap and everything, their tails go up, they bristle, and I mean, they react to the movement in the cornfield and the twig snapping. So obviously, they're reacting to it. They know that there's something there, and there's something there they don't like, so, and they actually flee, come back to the house, with the humans, their owners and Mr. Peters.
Yeah. I believe the animals are really big indicators for some strange cryptid paranormal stuff. That goes on out there. For some reason, they just seem to always have that natural instinct or that thing. Yeah.
Well, I want to mention a couple of cases that kind of remind me. It's just a little, Stan Gordon, right?
Yeah.
From Pennsylvania. He wrote a great book, and if you don't have it in your library, it's called something Pennsylvania case. Silent Invasion, case book something Pennsylvania. He has been a researcher since the late 60s, and really good guy. And Larry said that he actually talked with him, Larry Peters, and he's open to the paranormal aspect. He was kind of a more nuts and bolts, flesh and blood thing. But I think in October of '73, they had a huge UFO and Bigfoot wave, and paranormal activity or poltergeist type activity that happening in homes of people that were seeing Bigfoot types and UFOs that you briefly mentioned earlier. It started in late 72 and ended in probably February or March of 74, but 73 was the key year. In October of 73 in Uniontown, or outside of Uniontown, PA, and you may be familiar with this case, and I know the guy's real name, and I cannot remember it right now, but Stan Gordon has never given his real name, but you can find it in the newspaper articles, etc. But, he's coming home, and him and I think 8 other people, but he's driving home on dirt road to get back to the house, and there's a neighboring farm, and they see a UFO as big as a house. I can't remember if it's a white or red, globe shaped, and it settles behind a hill. He gets to the house, and these 2 neighborhood kids, are there visiting, and they're twins. Hey, let's go see, what went down there. And they wanted to know what landed on their property anyway, or adjacent property. And he grabs his 30-06 and grabs 6 rounds. And of course, 3 of them are tracers. He does not know that until he gets up there. And they take the truck and get up on, and as they get up to the crest of the hill, he sees this thing landed in the field. And they get out, and he notices the lights on the truck are dying, like something's pulling the battery. So he cuts it off, and they get to the crest of the hill and look down, and they see the UFO that's parked down there, in the field, sloping down from them. And I want to say, I can't remember what the measurements are, but I know it's inside of 100 yards. And he has the sound is like a motor of a lawnmower. But what distracts him is he sees a form along the fence line. And this fence line are railroad posts that have been driven in the ground. And if you're anything from the country, we take our railroad posts and we use them for anything, once they're taken out. They got
pretty
that
much
crimson, yeah. And they got that coating on it that they no longer put on there, but it kept it from decaying. Well, you could drive that in the ground and it would keep it from rotting or anything. And that black tar stuff they used to put on them.
Yep.
And telephone poles. Well, he notices a form, and he notices quickly that there's 2. One is about 12 foot, or no, one's 9 foot and the other one's about 7. But they're Bigfoot types with green glowing eyes and long arms below their knees. And they're going from pole to pole. The lead one, that was the larger one, would advance to one pole, and then the next one would come up behind him. And of course, one of the boys, said, hey, shoot it. And of course, the first two shots, he doesn't want to hit the thing. He wants to shoot over its head and get a reaction. The first shot he does, the UFO, the light disappears. Okay, it just vanishes. But the tracer, that's when he realizes he's got a tracer round, and it goes over the entity, and the entity turns and looks at him, or looks up their way. He fires the second one, and this thing actually reaches up to try to grab the tracer round or to touch it. And that's when, this gentleman, I think he's in his 20s at the time, he puts a third round in and he fires it, and it's a real round. But this time he means business, whether it's a tracer or not. And he actually hits it square in the chest and rocks it back, and it makes a yelling sound and turns around, and both entities start back where they came from, down the fence line. And later on, a state patrolman comes out to the area. They hear something, see something comes up that crashes against the fence line, and he actually puts his last round into that, which is kind of odd. Most people say, a law enforcement officer would not allow you to have your rifle. Well, back then they did, unless there was a reason that you were drunk or whatever. He's out there talking with you, and you got a rifle and you said you used it. As long as you're not pointing it to him, he's not going to take your rifle away.
True.
So that's that strange case. And you probably heard this one. I think it's February of 74. So it's a few months later. And it's, again, Uniontown in Aurora area, where this elderly lady lives in her home. And earlier, her son-in-law, lives in a trailer on the property. She says something's not right. She's hearing, and so she's scared. He comes over, and he's got a 22 pistol with, I think it's a 9-shot, and he sees the red eyes. And notice these are red eyes, and they've got shapes, and they're like Bigfoot type shapes, but they're just back enough where he can't get good definition. But he unloads on them without any effect, and he calms her down and da-da-da. Well, on another night, her thing goes off. She's put cans around the back of her property. If dogs or something start coming, she doesn't want them in her trash. And I want to say it's a 20 gauge. I've read different sources. One says 12, one says 20. Stan Gordon would know, but and he records it in his book Silent Invasion. But she's got her shotgun. She lives by herself. She puts on the back porch light. She opens up the door quickly, and she's pointing the gun. She just wants to scare somebody, and if there's somebody there, well, and there's a Bigfoot type creature standing on her back porch and raises its arms as she raises the gun. She lets it off, and Stan, I think, said it was around no more than 3 to 4 foot from the tip of that gun. So at point blank range, she lets off shot. And it doesn't say if it's bird shot, whatever, but it's a shotgun shell at 3 to 4 foot. Bird shot would kill you at that range. It would blow your guts out.
Yes.
But what she experiences is not that. All of a sudden, there's a pop and a flash of light, and it's gone. That's it. She unloads on it. She hears a crack or a pop, and the entity, the Bigfoot type entity, disappears in a flash of light.
Yeah, see that to me, that one has "fave" written all over it.
Yeah.
But so we are going on. I think we're a little over 2 hours now. So let me ask you. Yeah, let me ask you a question real quick. So to bring us in for a landing.
Yeah.
Back to the night siege. Okay.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? So you don't believe it's a hoax?
No, I do not believe it's a hoax. Like I said, you got too many people involved. You got 5 investigators, 2 that got probably a lot more involved than most investigators would, by taking up arms. They would probably criticize the investigators for participating. You need to stand back and observe.
I'll be honest, when we go on our investigations out in the woods, my team's armed.
Oh yeah, I do too. Look, I don't believe Bigfoot types, whether let's just say they're, some of them are mammals, unknown species, whatever.
Well, there's other things in the woods that can hurt you.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, we got bobcat, mountain lion. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole bunch. We got black bear down here as well. So,
but I do not. I have never believed, no matter what you think about Bigfoot, I don't believe they're all teddy bears.
No,
I don't, and never have. But with the footprints, the police on the scene twice, 15 to 16 witnesses. You got the local news thing running its articles, and they're saying farms or whatever. So it's not just this one. There's just too much evidence that something is going on. Something happened. You can criticize the family for not, getting more involved or, let me leave the property. But you got to understand the people behind it. Well,
they did. The family does leave the property. They eventually, they sell and move away.
Yeah, I mean, they've lost, some ducks. They've lost a chicken. They're fearing for their cow and their horse. They're guarding it. And what the other farmers have lost on both sides. And just, the Bigfoot type entities, whereas the dark forms stay in the tree line or, whatever, and they come out into the plowed field, the Bigfoot types, at least twice, one in the front yard and one in the backyard, 30 feet. And I did want to mention this. There were 2 other damages. The fuse box, and you and I grew up, I don't know how old you are, but the old breaker boxes had fuses in them when we were growing up.
Yeah.
Those ones you would screw in, screw out. Yep. Sometimes you could put a penny in there. That was kind of dangerous. But he noticed he didn't have any hot water, and he went down to the basement and found out that something had been down there, and with maybe a strong finger or whatever, but several of the fuses were pushed into the fuse box. I mean, pushed in. Actually.
See, that has fey activity right there. That's what they do.
Yeah, pushed in. And he said that was odd. It wasn't enough to damage the other fuses, but this one particular one that, ran the hot water heater did. The other thing, the gas meter, that kept, what a gas meter looks like on, where the trunk line's at, that monitors it, and they had batteries and everything, was damaged, basically destroyed twice, and the batteries taken out and squeezed. They looked like somebody had put them in their hand and squeezed the contents out of them.
That sounds like fey folk.
Yeah. And so you got physical damage that's taking place on the property, but also inside the property. I mean, something went into the basement, was able to get into the basement without breaking in any door or window. And causing some type of physical damage to the fuse box. And they heard something in the basement, but didn't think much of it. I mean,
Yeah, just
okay,
like, okay, yeah, there's a noise. Yeah, a house is
something
settled.
fell.
They do, yeah, they make
Yeah,
noises.
the house is setting or something fell. But then when he went to take a bath or a shower, didn't say what type of unit he had in there. But he goes to investigate. Obviously, I got a bad fuse or whatever. Go and change. Guess what? Because everybody kept a box of good fuses in the fuse box or next to it. You go out there and change them out. You took your flashlight, went down in there, and you changed the fuse out. And people wouldn't understand that today, but that's what you did. But more than one fuse was pushed in, but that one was totally inoperable. So I wanted to briefly mention that. But yeah, I don't. And like I said, somebody would have said something by now. And the strange bad thing is that I mentioned it to you in the text I sent you or the message I sent you, that one of the guys on the YouTube video mentioned that with Dennis's death and the other people, dying off and the family dying off and the family moving back into town and everything, there's a possibility if this wasn't a hoax, we've lost some great information and a great opportunity, because this here was a little of everything. And even though our technology was limited back then, but what we could collect and what we could do, can you imagine what we might be able to do with, and you mentioned it too, with the negatives today? If we had all that stuff, if we had all of Dennis's files, the negatives that he did not send back to Larry Peters, and be able to talk to some living witnesses, I do believe that there's a possibility Larry Lambert and Bobby Lambert are still alive. I would love to find out if they are and if they would talk.
Yeah,
I know the parents are dead.
I mean, he was 16, 17 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the younger one was about 12, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
there's
they
a
may be alive.
huge, they very well may be alive. They may very well be
Yeah.
in the area.
Yeah. And I've looked, but like I said, I've not, there's so many Bobby Lamberts and Larry Lamberts, and so I didn't find any in the area, but, and chances of you staying there for 40 years is remote. I mean, people move a lot more today.
Yeah.
I mean, families aren't close anymore. So that would be interesting. You may want to look into that, see if you can find something that I couldn't, sometimes
I've got Chris. Chris is really good at finding people. I give him that. I mean, Chris is great.
All you got to do is, if you could contact somebody like that, find them and contact them and say, hey, was your father a Vietnam vet? And was his nickname Mickey? And Mickey and Della. And if they go, yeah, you got the person, and then you could kind of introduce yourself and say, hey, would you be willing to talk? And that way they say, the worst thing they could say is no.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'd love to interview one of the kids from the Amityville Horror.
Oh yeah, I would too.
Yeah, I know the Lutzes have passed on, and I know the one son came out, and very briefly, because once they were like, yeah, everything was a hoax, and he came out and he goes, no, it wasn't. Yeah. There was a lot more than what was in the book. So,
yeah, I think I saw a similar video.
And where he came out briefly, then went back into hiding.
Yeah, both actually passed. Both individuals, they got divorced, and they both stuck to the story
even after the divorce. Yeah,
yeah, and they both, if I remember correctly, one or both passed lie detector tests.
Yep.
So
yeah, very fascinating.
Yeah. But getting back to that, I do not believe it was a hoax. The other thing is, Dennis was impressed when he first got there that, I mean, the shell casings were on the ground, that had rolled off the roof. So yeah, I just don't believe the hoax theory of Willard being involved and getting the family involved. Peter said there was no such thing as firing blanks. He said, I was there those 2 nights and I participated in it. I was handed double alt buck. I know what double alt buck is. I'm military. I fired it. And when I was there, when they were firing rifle shots, I could hear the 30-06 and the 12 gauge stuff, the stuff that they were using. I heard it splintering and hitting trees. He said, so they were not shooting blanks, because I brought that up to him. He had no idea.
Tell. I mean, you can tell if a round is a blank fire or if it's a real fire. You can easily see.
I've never fired a blank, so I wouldn't know. But I mean, Larry Peters on the phone
See,
when I told
you
him
Air
about
Force
that.
guys didn't get a chance to go and play with the cool toys like us
Yeah,
Army guys
yeah.
did.
We fired real rounds,
Oh,
but
we trained firing at each other with blanks,
oh yeah, we
with
weren't
blank
giving blank.
adapters on. And
Right.
if you take the blank adapter off, there's a little wad that comes out, and there's a nice little flame.
Yeah.
You're going to
Right.
get a bigger burst than you will with a regular
Yeah.
round. So
You
there's
know,
an obvious difference.
when I told Larry Peters, like I said, he's the only living investigator. I know that for a fact. That's still alive. When I told him that quite a few thought it was a hoax and that Willard was involved, he shot that down. He said, "Look, I can tell you point blank, Willard may have gotten doped or fooled about that extraterrestrial thing that he had a photograph on, and people said that he was part of a hoax and all this other stuff." He said, but he was very serious, and he said what he involved me with at the Rome Township was real. That was not part of a hoax. He may have gotten a little wacky with Bigfoot, saying, oh, every sound was Bigfoot because he got so deep involved in it that it became like a religion to him. He said, but I knew Willard for a long time. And he said Willard was not part of a hoax. He said those people did not participate in a hoax. What they were going through was real. And he said it changed my life. Last thing I do want to mention, Mr. Peters will tell you, when I called him today, he said, I'm going to tell you something I didn't tell you before. He said, after I did that 12 gauge on those eyes into that gap, and we later found that 60-foot diameter with not a lot of growth open area that they later, hung that last rabbit from. He said, as I was walking back to the house very briskly with the couple behind me, he said, Mickey and his wife said that they saw a light beam come out. But I mean, they were facing him, so they were behind him. A light beam struck him in the back. He said, I didn't feel nothing. I didn't see nothing. He said, they just told me about it when we got back to the house. And he said, I didn't think nothing of it. And he said, several months to a year later, he said, I developed a red spot in that area that they said I got hit by. He said, I still burn an itch from it today. He said, and I've seen 4 doctors about it. So that's another physical effect. Whatever he shot at, I guess, excuse the term, got a little pissed and got a little upset. He didn't see it, didn't feel it, but Mickey and Della said that he got hit by a light beam between his shoulder blades as they were walking back to the house.
Yeah, this whole encounter has so many boxes checked. And you can't. This is one of those encounters you can't put into just one box. Okay, yes, it was.
When
a
you get a
Bigfoot.
chance,
It was
when you
an
get a
alien.
chance, get a topographic map and look at the area. You already got the satellite stuff, and the more you look at it, the more impressive it is. You're kind of like, wow. Because I looked at the township, and it's fluctuating. I think it's got the highest population, 1,400 people. I think today it was around maybe 700, and at the time about 800. But it's a very rural area. And South Creek, before we cut off, South Creek, Dennis is there for the Lamberts, and then he hears about something about, I think it's 4, 5, 6 miles away, not, to the northeast, and it's called South Fork. And a teenager is walking across, or basically, following a railway line, and he sees a Bigfoot, very similar to what's on the Lamberts property, red glowing eyes, big thing, and it follows him. He jumps off on a trail, and it stays on the rail line. And he runs, he gets some teenagers, they come back and look, and they spot this thing again. Little different. They said the face is a little malformed, which kind of makes me think, is it shape-shifting again? They said one of the eyes was off to the side.
Or was it the Fae folk trying to project a weird image at you?
Right. But this leaves one 3-toed 14-inch footprint into the side of a mound that's near the railroad. And it's the only print. And, Dennis found that kind of odd, but it's not really odd when you investigate Bigfoot prints. They can appear out of nowhere and end in nowhere. Sometimes you find one print. Sometimes you see them, walk through mud or a puddle and there's no prints, So that's not odd, but he thought it odd at the time. And that's in the book. At the back of the book, you can see a picture of that. And guess what? There's a gas line nearby. in that same area. So you basically have a gas line, and they fire on this second one, and they believe they found some, where it had laid or fell. They saw it drop, and they found a blood-like substance, or they claim, So things are happening on adjacent farms on that same road, and then no more than 4 or 6 miles away in another town outside of it, South Fork, you have a Bigfoot entity that's seen twice, been fired on. It does drop, and it does leave a print, and you got a similar 3-toed footprint. So there's a lot going on around that area, and it's not just something isolated. Even though the Lambert farm seems to, it really went all out there. And for those people that bring up the hoax hypothesis, the one that knocks me more than anything is that they didn't do it. I, like I said, won't mention any names. They did a good job of presenting it on there, but when they brought up the hoax hypothesis, my biggest criticism was that, for somebody like myself within 2 hours can contact the only living investigator, you couldn't have done that. If you had talked to this guy, you wouldn't even bring up the idea of a hoax. Or let's put it this way. You would bring up, if you brought up the term hoax, you would be basically talking about why it's most likely not a hoax, not why it probably is a hoax. Willard McIntyre is the weak link. That's the one, because he was involved or got brought into a hoax with this extraterrestrial crash victim thing. They ruled it out, saying that, it was a burned up fighter pilot or something like that. And Willard got, duped on it. They automatically say this case has got to be bad because, Willard's involved with it, and I'm kind of like, no, you can always make a mistake or be, duped into something, but that doesn't mean that all the cases that you were involved in are now suspect. We all have those moments where we look stupid or make a mistake on something, but that doesn't ruin everything that we've had our fingers into, especially
Exactly.
the other people.
Well, that's the sad part. That's what people do now. So if somebody, gets caught up in something that's shady, and I don't care who you are. People, it's happened to everybody. If we were judged upon sometimes making a bad decision, people make bad decisions every day. Look how many traffic accidents are out there.
Yeah.
We don't judge them for that.
Yeah.
So
maybe you and a few of the other people, if you can see if you can find out if the two boys are alive. The other thing is to see if anybody knows about. Dennis has a copy of his UFO and his Bigfoot newsletter in the back. It's kind of hard to look at, but he's got it printed towards the back. If anybody can dig up a few of those around that time period, late 81, 82, you would think in that time period, if he was going to produce any extra information off the Rome Township investigation or concluding it because, the family moved into town, he did a follow-up, etc., maybe we can find some of that information. I did find one guy, I forget his name. I'd have to go back and look through my notes. Somebody asked a question, what happened to Dennis's files? So we can know more about the Rome Township stuff. And this one guy says, well, I know of a lady that he may have given his files to, and I'm going to ask her if she knows anything about it. Larry A. Peters, his friend and, the only living investigator, said that he doesn't know what happened to the files. Dennis was supposedly, had called him up about 8 months before his death and said, I'm going to give you power of attorney so you can get, my materials and get access to some of my stuff, because he was still in his parents' old home. And then he lost contact with him and found out that he had died, because I looked up his obituary and everything. And Larry Peters has no idea who has those files, because Larry said he didn't have any family members. He didn't have any brothers or sisters, aunts or uncles that he knew of. And that, like I said, that other guy mentioned he may have given them to another researcher or another lady from the northern part of the state. So maybe if we could track down his files, or maybe get some of his newsletters where he may have, did a continuance on the Rome Township thing, and even better, find one of the two living boys that would be willing to speak, especially Larry.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll be honest with you, I'd love to talk to Larry.
if he now Bobby could remember some stuff because he was there for a lot of it. He drove the tractor at the wood line and
Yeah, but
watched his
the
brother
activity
and
dies
father.
down when Larry leaves, and that's when I
Yeah,
want to talk to Larry.
yeah. He was there. The youngest stayed, so he could tell you what the activity was like after his brother left. And he was around their parents when they were talking. The boys were not excluded from the parents and the investigators. They were part of it. So if
Yeah,
you find them,
it's all,
please let me know.
yeah, it's all. I will. It's all extremely fascinating, and
Oh
I'm
yeah,
going to go with the whole entire, because I got to bring this in for a landing. Hope
yeah.
because this is a long episode, but
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's a hoax. I firmly believe, because I'll be honest with you, I can play some hoax theories out there. I can throw that out there. I could
Oh
play
yeah.
into a whole bunch of stuff as well. Um, but I don't get the vibe of it being a hoax, especially with the 3 months of activity with the investigators being there. Dennis staying there pretty much.
Yeah.
And and if you think about it, this is a big hoax to write a 40-page book on, 40
Yeah.
pages, only 40 pages, to try and become rich and famous. And I don't think
Well,
that was the intent at all.
yeah. I
Um,
want to add. I want to add one last thing to it, though. Besides the 15 to 16 witnesses and the numerous investigators, which like I said, you do. If you're going to do a hoax, you want to involve less people. The
yes.
other thing is, if you're going to do a hoax, you generally keep it to one or two items. I'm going to do a hoax on a UFO or a Bigfoot or maybe both, but 3 or 4 different types of entities, 2 different types of UFOs, gunfire, uh, hoof prints, three-toed prints, 5-toed prints. I mean, that's a big pile on. I mean, if you're going to do a hoax, you're going to keep it simple. You're not going
It'd have
to
been more profitable
this
to
here.
do a movie.
Yeah, this here, by what they saw and experienced and what Dennis collected, is, and I'm going to say it, if you're not open-minded, it's less believable. It is. I mean, the more you heap into it, or the more you tell me about, oh, they saw this, they saw that, oh, this shape shifted. Unless I'm open-minded and I've done some research, I'm going to be less. It's going to be less believable. I'm going to just shake my head and say, you lost me at that one. So if I'm going to do a hoax, I want you to believe. I don't want to add stuff on that's going to make you doubt me more.
Yeah,
So
make it more. It makes it more controversial
yes,
and
and
complicated.
there you go. And when you do that, for the average person that's not open-minded or disbelieving outright, you pretty well lose them after the second or third add-on. I'll tell you that point blank.
Oh yeah, I mean, being a skeptic, I'm a biggest believer, and I'm also the biggest skeptic. There is a few aspects of this story that does, encounter that does make me want to go, huh?
Oh yeah,
But at the same time, too, I view everything as this event was real enough for 3 months. My apologies, not 3 nights. 3 months.
yeah,
I
no,
had
no
the
problem.
3 right, though.
Yeah,
It was enough for this family to pretty much sell their farm. And, and I'm, being a veteran, I get the guy, the dad. He wants to
yeah,
live in the country. He wants to be left alone. He wants to do his own thing. He's,
yeah,
a lot of those guys came home like that, which is
yeah.
completely understandable.
And you remember his wife is the one that called the sheriff's department. It wasn't him.
Yeah.
His wife got frustrated and called the sheriff's department twice. She got fed up with it.
Yeah, she was the smart one.
Yeah.
I hate saying that, but she was. She was like, okay,
Yeah,
enough's
I'm gonna get
enough.
somebody else involved. Nothing's changing. It's getting worse.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, that's what Talina would do. She'd be the first one on the phone to cops going, hey, get over here before my husband does something stupid,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just how it is. But James,
Yeah.
okay, so I am going to schedule you. I do want to get you back on because I want to dig into the UFO stuff that you went through as a kid.
Yeah.
So I will be. So as soon as I get done recording, I'll talk to you. We'll get a date set up.
Yeah.
But
Just message me.
Thank you for coming through. Thank you for coming on, and I mean doing this research.
Yeah.
I
And I apologize if I was long-winded. Hopefully, if somebody listens to this, they won't get tired after like 30 minutes to an hour, or if they do, they come back to it, because I think that this is a unique case, and unfortunately, I think with the death of all the investigators but one, and then other investigators not talking to Mr. Peters and doing their homework, which I did easily inside of 2 hours. And I'm not like yourself. I have minimum skills in this.
I have
you know,
Chris and Tommy for this. I'll be honest with you. So you're
Yeah.
doing better than me.
Yeah. Well, I just think a lot of information was lost in this, but I do believe by me talking to Mr. Peters and maybe you talking with him or they talking with him, whatever, you may get something out of him in a conversation that I either didn't ask or he didn't remember. He's 84 years old now.
And that's the thing too. You got to look at, when it comes to Mr. Peters, because he is, at 84, and he is going to be, we do forget certain things. I mean, I have a hard time, even, I'm sure you can attest from our military time, looking back and going, okay, hold on, okay, because
he's been honest.
I was 6 when this incident went down in 81, so that tells you.
Yeah.
So I'm 50 now. So
yeah.
Yeah, that's why you're like, I remember the fuse. Yep, I remember that.
He was honest with me because in his book he said he did not take a picture of that rabbit, that they put into that 60 circular foot area devoid of most, vegetation and some snapped limbs, and what they found when they came back. And then I think our third conversation, he said, I got to apologize to you. He said, I said that I didn't take any pictures. He said I was going through some stuff and. I found a negative, and I found, guess what? I took pictures. And that's when I said, hey, I want one.
Yeah.
And he sent me a positive of it, printed it out for me. So he's honest. I mean, if he was part of a hoax, he probably wouldn't have corrected himself on that.
No, not being at 84 either. I mean, at this point in time, I mean, this is like going, hey, look, man, we faked everything. It was a hoax. Let it die.
Yeah.
So, but it's awesome that he was able to talk to you, and his information. I'll probably reach out to him and introduce myself, and
being it's kind of late, I will send you the stuff tomorrow morning. I'm not working tomorrow. I'll send you a copy. I've got it in my gallery file, my photos, and I'll send you the pictures. Do you have his book, Strange Creatures?
I do not. We were
okay.
Yeah. So I mean, once we were starting to dig into this, me and Tommy were looking at some of the books and trying to.
I'm gonna say something to you that I would appreciate you not saying to him.
Okay. Do you want to wait till we're done recording?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you wait till we're done recording? All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm just gonna mute you real quick, and I'll do a quick outro, and then don't hang up. So whatever you do.
And what I was saying was referring to, I don't want to bother him with a criticism on something, not him personally. I don't want nobody, a listener, to get the idea that I'm criticizing him.
No, not at all. All right.
Okay.
All right. Just hang on one second. Wow. That was absolutely crazy. What starts off with putting in a gas pipeline? Kind of makes you wonder about the other pipelines. Not getting into politics, folks. Putting in a gas pipeline, what goes on, what takes place, and what could be stirred up. It's just, this definitely doesn't scream hoax to me at all. There's nothing hoaxy about this. There's too much going on, and I'm still going to run with the faith theory. But again, too, though, it's just a theory out there. But I do want to say thank you guys for listening into the show. I do appreciate it. Remember, if you've had an encounter and you want to come on the show, email me, drunkencryptids@gmail.com. Until next time, everybody, keep on squatching.
I can do anything that I want. I can do anything that I want now. I can do anything that I want. Hey, hey, if it is to be, you know that it's up to me. I'm headed to the front. I can be anything that I want. I can be anything.